Hello, everybody, and welcome to another week of Bearski Film. And tonight we have a very special guest, Taylor Dahl. She's a Bears fan from Jacksonville that covers the Jaguars. So, how are you tonight, Taylor?
Hey, I'm good. I appreciate you guys having me on.
Yeah, thanks for finding the time to come on with us and talk some Bears with us. But why don't you let everybody know where they can find you, what your content is, and everything like that? I know you're a part of Second City Gridiron, but yeah, you'll probably lay it out there better than I can. So.
Yeah, so you'll find me on Twitter. It's at Taydal1010XL. The 1010XL part is because I do cover the Jaguars here in Jacksonville. So I do split my time. It's half Jags content, half Bears content. But I do podcasts for Second City Gridiron / Windy City. It used to be Windy City Gridiron. We kind of transformed to Second City Gridiron. And so I have a podcast on there called Making Monsters. The gist of it kind of started to where I was getting to know players kind of beyond the football field. So I still do those every now and then where I'll get dads, sisters, brothers, former coaches, high school coaches, college coaches, stuff like that on to talk about the players and kind of how they got into football, how they got into the NFL and stuff like that. So I do have a lot of breakdowns on players with that. Like if you want to learn more about a Jaquan Brisker or a Jalen Johnson or any of those guys, I do have episodes out on a lot of the players still. It used to be my main thing. And then we kind of branched off where we are like, okay, we'll do those every now and then when I get some big names to talk about some of these people. Like I'm working on a Roma Dunze one coming up that I'm trying to get Kalen DeBoer on. So I've been working on that for a while and stuff like that. But we also kind of pivoted during the season. I do all of our preview shows. So before every game, you'll see me kind of break down with an opposing reporter or opposing former player, something like that, where we'll break down the matchup and what to expect. The off season for me, though, is like the most fun because I just kind of get to do what I want to do. And so right now I'm doing a coaching series. We're getting to know all of the coaches. I've done one on Ben Johnson already. I had one drop on Saturday on Dennis Allen and Al Harris. It was a really good one. If people want to learn a little bit more about those two guys, swing by because it was really in depth about Dennis Allen and how the Bears already have players to fit his defense, what to expect from his defenses, what Al Harris can bring. And then it was a Saints guy, obviously. So he really went into the Declan Doyle too, because Declan Doyle was in New Orleans for a little bit. And so we talked a lot, all of those guys a little bit, and it's fun. So this time of year, I kind of just get to like do what I want to do. And that's the fun part.
Yeah, awesome. A lot of content right there, a lot of good stuff. So yeah,
Frankly,
I can't wait.
It sounds like what you do for fun is what we would like to do.
Yeah, right.
When we get big, when we actually make it. So that's cool.
No, it's good stuff, good content, and with that, you might as well add the name. What is it? Roushar, right? The offensive line coach from the
Dan Roushar.
Yeah. That is another good hire that came today. But I wanted to specifically ask you, since you've been, focusing on the Jaguars a little bit and whatnot, about the one guy that's probably not a big fan favorite amongst the fan base, and that would be Press Taylor. Yeah. So what can you tell us about him from your experiences?
Yeah.
There in Jacksonville. I got to do it.
I know. I know.
So I had to get it out of the way. I just had to.
It's hilarious. I get embarrassed every time I watch that video. So Press Taylor, I will start by saying I immediately tweeted and was like, oh no, because I'm not a Press Taylor fan, but I do have to say the reason of that is he's been the offensive coordinator here in Jacksonville. So obviously that's a little bit different. Like we have a very different experience with Press Taylor in Jacksonville than what the Bears will have. Passing game coordinator compared to an offensive coordinator who's calling plays is very different roles. So I will start by saying that, but there were just a lot of things with Press to me and Doug Peterson. Doug Peterson was part of this problem too, where there was a lot of secrets and there was a lot of games being played. And I didn't like that. The last couple years, they would never officially say who was calling plays. Like if they'd ask Doug on the podium, Doug would be like, we don't know. Like before the season started, it was like, we don't know. We're still discussing. Weird thing to say. Like, who's calling plays between your head coach and your offensive coordinator. For some reason, they didn't want to say it. And so you go back to 2022. And when the Jags had that run at the end of 2022, end up getting into the playoffs, they're facing the Chargers. They beat the Chargers, come back down, multiple touchdowns. Trevor Lawrence throws 4 picks in the first half, ends up coming back and winning that game. And then they play Kansas City the next week, and they take Kansas City, honestly, to the whim and almost end up upsetting Kansas City. And as that was all going on, everyone at that time was under the impression that Doug Peterson was the play caller, but in second halves of games, Press Taylor would take over. And so it was a weird concept of why, first of all, why are these two guys like splitting play calling in certain areas? And to me, I was like, it would make sense if maybe they're like, okay, the third down play calls are Press Taylor, or maybe just like fourth quarter when you need, if you're down by 10, if you're up by 10, Press Taylor. It was just, we were told first half of games was Doug Peterson, second half of games was Press Taylor. And so everyone already thought that was weird, but the second half of games was when a lot of the Jaguars, they'd be down, and then in the second half they'd come back and rally and win games. So people were like, oh, okay, well, Press Taylor must be a good play caller, because anytime you need these clutch moments from Trevor, it was apparent that it was Press Taylor who was involved in that. So then as time goes, you go back, and in 2023, things kind of fell apart. Obviously, the Jags start 8-3. They end up losing the final, I think like 6 of 7 or whatever it was at the end of the season, end up missing the playoffs because of that. Trevor Lawrence is battling a bunch of injuries, but you also saw just like a true regression of the offense as a whole. You were seeing Trevor get worse. He was turning the ball over a ton, fumbling a ton. Some of people were factoring in like maybe it's just these injuries, maybe he's not 100%. And so you were still trying to figure out what exactly was going on, because in the start of this season, when they started 8-3, it wasn't pretty. It wasn't like you were watching this high-powered offense to where you felt like they were unstoppable, but they were coming out and winning games and winning close games that you were like, okay, this must be good enough, like that you can get by with this. So it ended up falling apart. That's when people started asking questions. Are we still doing this split Doug Peterson, Press Taylor thing, or is Doug fully taking over? And they just would never tell us. So this whole last off season, it was this big conspiracy of who was going to call plays this year. You'd even ask Trevor Lawrence, and Trevor would kind of be like, I don't know. Like, we haven't really talked about it. Well, like, we'll know once the season starts. And then the season started, and every time you would ask Doug or Press, it was very like pushed to the side, almost like it doesn't matter who's calling plays, or we have our system of who's calling plays, and it's working, but it wasn't working. So people at that point started getting frustrated. And I think that if you have a situation where you're not really answering, but it's working, people won't press you on it. But if it's not working, if your offense is looking bad and it truly was starting to look like Trevor Lawrence was getting worse, which is a concern. You spend a first overall pick. He also just got a contract this last summer, by the way, to make him tied with Joe Burrow for the highest paid quarterback in the league. And you're seeing this guy get worse, and you're seeing him scared in the pocket. Like, he was running from like invisible pressure at certain points of the year. He was turning the ball over again, making really bad decisions, overthrowing people. And that's when people started looking at Press Taylor. Like, okay, well, if you guys won't tell us who's actually calling plays, then we're going to assume what was happening in the previous years, which was that in the second half of games, it was Press Taylor. And in the second halves of games, Jaguars were completely collapsing and Trevor Lawrence was not looking good. So we're going to blame you then. So it's kind of been a very weird situation when it comes to what it was. And like I said, there's rumors also that Doug Peterson, the reason he even got fired from Philly, was also Press Taylor. So now he just got fired from his second job because of Press Taylor. And it's alarming to me. So
yeah, I got to say, it is kind of refreshing to hear the dysfunction somewhere else. I'm just like, oh yeah, I know that. I get it. I've heard something that crazy before over here. Yeah. It's just nice to hear that it also happens in other places.
It sounds like a lot of the things that me and Paulie always kind of mention about the Bears. It's a combination of two guys trying to be the smartest guys in the room and just kind of outsmarting everybody. And we know better, and like, just be straightforward, man. Like, just sometimes it's easier to be simple. And then also a little bit of too many cooks in the kitchen. Right. So, I guess if we're talking Press Taylor though, and like kind of the Jaguars, cause we watched, some Jags football, we like to watch general football, but much more. The only thing I really know about Press Taylor is like he's brothers with Zach Taylor, and obviously they're going to have some bones to their offenses that are similar. And then knowing what I know about Doug Peterson, what would you like describe as the tenets, or even something as what are the characteristics of like a Press Taylor and Doug Peterson offense, and how that's going to kind of, maybe even if he has a little bit of influence here, like what does that look like more, with Evan Ingram being like an off-ball tight end and maybe 3 wide receivers, or like a single back, any fullback kind of stuff? Like, what do you know about that offense that he enjoys to run?
Yeah, and I think that it depends when you're asking. If we go back to the end of 2022, beginning of 2023, I would say I would explain it completely different than what I would have within this last year and a half. And so it looked very different. And that's what also people were trying to figure out of the play calling side, because it did look like very different offenses between those two times. Some of it is personnel. We know that. Like, you know, you do have a Christian Kirk and an Evan Ingram, but Christian Kirk gets hurt. And so you're going to have to kind of change things around that. There was a lot of weirdness kind of going on, a lot of injuries happening. So things did shift a little bit. But what I will say is one of the things they really do like to use, they like to use the running backs. And when the offense worked in 2022, Travis Etienne was a massive focal point in what they did offensively. And they used him everywhere. They used him running up the middle. They used him, you know, going out on the outside. They used him in the passing game. They used him all over the place. And that was one of the things that worked so well in 2022. And one of the things that they steered away from this last year and a half that people were wondering why, because they also get a running back in Tank Bigsby, who has some fumbling issues when he has the ball in his hands, is really good at forcing missed tackles and getting those yards after contact and stuff like that. And so we thought coming into the season that it was going to be kind of what Detroit did, where with Monty and with Jahmyr Gibbs, in this world of you have two different style backs. And so we were hoping that you would see both of these backs used differently and it being able to work in a positive light offensively. For some reason, Doug and Press could not get that to work, but they wanted to. And you could tell because they never fully abandoned the run game. They tried to keep making it work, but it just for some reason was not. I personally think some of that is the offensive line. The Jags offensive line struggled a lot in the interior. And as Bears fans know, it's hard to run the ball behind the middle of the offensive line if nobody's blocking anybody. So that was kind of some of the issues here too. But when it comes to Press Taylor and what he does passing game wise and with what he did with Trevor Lawrence, some of what we did like is it was a lot of downfield stuff. And I think that what Evan Ingram and Christian Kirk were able to do in the slot, like Evan, I think was more that like midfield slot guy that they used him as that. I always say he's more of a receiving tight end, you know, like he's more of that pass catching tight end. He's not that big, bulky Travis Kelce type of tight end. So they did use him more as a wide receiver type, which I did think benefited them because they had a guy like Christian Kirk and Evan Ingram who they could both use in these wide receiver roles, and they could use them in the mid intermediate, but then also Christian Kirk could go deep because he was fast. And so they did like Trevor Lawrence to get the ball downfield. And that was a massive part of what happened at the end of 2022. Both Evan Ingram and Christian Kirk had career years that first year in 2022 when it came to the receptions they had, when it came to yards, when it comes to touchdowns. Both of them, all three, set their career years with that. And because a lot of it was Trevor pressing the ball down the field. And so I do think that teams maybe caught up to that a little bit once they got into that next year. They kind of knew that that's what Trevor could do. And Trevor struggled with short passes a little bit more. I don't know what it is, but if it's like less than 12 for some reason, Trevor's overthrowing people. So they like to stretch the field. They like to do that type of stuff. That's why they draft a guy like Brian Thomas Jr. So you're going into the season and you're like, okay, now you have BTJ and you have Gabe Davis, who ended up being an absolute bust this season. But you had these guys that could stretch the field and benefit what Press Taylor likes to do, which is just that. He likes to get the ball. He doesn't really like the short stuff. If they are running screen passes, they're not working. It's usually like the weird bubble screens that go nowhere. And so it didn't work here in Jacksonville. So a lot of it is, and what I would say, which I think Bears fans would be pleased to hear, because I do think they would like to see a little bit more deep ball accuracy and a little more deep balls with Caleb Williams, because that was just something that he struggled with a bit last year. There was a lot of inaccuracy when it came to his deep passes. And then you'd see moments where you're like, it's there somewhere. Somebody just has to bring it out. So if I could pull any positive out of that, I will say that Press Taylor being around Trevor, that was one of the things that they really did push and draw out of Trevor Lawrence, is being comfortable in getting those passes 30 plus yards down the field.
You know, it's interesting, that whole quarterback class. I mean, Trevor Lawrence was the last one hanging on, and you know, he got paid. He was the only one that got paid out of all five that went in the first round. And it was just kind of, you know, a little sad to see him just collapse the way it did, especially because once you do get paid, you have to live up to the value of that contract. Yeah. David, I don't know if you had some thoughts on that anymore. I still wanted to ask you about Bieniemy, because I haven't even gotten your thoughts on the Bieniemy hire. haven't heard
Just
that at
one
all,
more
so.
question, I guess, with like Press Taylor. This could be quick because I'm just genuinely curious about, again, like the bones of it all and how that translates to like the Bears. So with Evan Ingram being such a different type of pass, like catching tight end,
Mhm.
was Press Taylor's offense, do you guys have any fullbacks in the last 2-3 years? Was there ever any
No.
like big packages going on with Evan Ingram kind of being on the opposite side of a run and the backup tight end blocking on the outside? Or is it was just so light boxed kind of, we're going to spread you out. And then if we do run it, it's because you have a light box kind of thing.
Yeah, they had no fullback. They did this last year. They drafted another tight end, not this last, in 2023, Brenton Strange. Brenton Strange took a way bigger role this year, and Brenton Strange is a bigger, more blocking style tight end. He'll block, but he will also. Evan Ingram, battling injuries, came in and stepped in for him and played well also. And so, but it was a very predictable offense, to the point that that's even the word Shad Khan used after the season when they were explaining why they didn't initially fired Trent Baalke, and his reasonings were he felt it was more the coaching, and that the coaching was very predictable when it came into end game and to the actual in-game situations. And so it wasn't anything that people couldn't figure out. And I think that's what was so frustrating with watching it, because when you were seeing this team, especially this year, like I said, when you have Christian Kirk and Evan Ingram coming not far off of some of their best seasons, and then you have a Travis Etienne who also had one of the best years too. He obviously missed his whole first year to injury. After that, was one of the best running backs in the league. And then you add Brian Thomas Jr. and you add Gabe Davis and Brenton Strange second year, and you have all of these things. And they did add pieces. They added a center in Mitch Morse from Buffalo. And so they did add all these pieces, and for everybody was like, okay, now you have everything. You have all the personnel to do that type of stuff that you're talking about, where you're maybe a little more two tight end setups. I'm hoping the Jags do that this year, but you barely saw it at all this year. It was nothing.
Yeah.
It was very predictable offenses and nothing crazy. And like I said, it could have all been Doug. Nobody will tell us anything. So it could have been Doug Peterson doing all of this. And we'll never know, I don't think.
It's funny because I think we went through the same thing even maybe last year with more so Luke Getsy than Shane Waldron, where sometimes we were just like, man, this stuff isn't working. And the stuff that's working is the stuff you refuse to try to run, where it's just just run big packages out there, line up a fullback and two tight ends, and just, roll out. Like, this is more Justin Fields time, but I guess that's just kind of neither here nor there. I was going to lead to this, Pauly, so that's perfect that you pulled that up. So I feel like there's a few teams in the NFL that always share like the nucleuses, right? And then there's always just connections. Like right now I can think of Bears. We're a Bears show, obviously. Yeah. Atlanta's always picking up our scraps. And right now I think
some Kansas City ties.
Some Kansas City ties, obviously, with Ryan Poles and stuff. And there's some Eagles ties, not so much with Ian Cunningham, but I think the Bears and the Jags are starting to kind of meet on a path. And then their similarities are starting to get really close. Like, we were this close to having the Bears instead of, Duval. So
but the DJ Moore trade was huge. I'm sorry, that was the Panthers. My bad.
Right. So I'm just saying,
I get those cat teams mixed up sometimes.
Those, we were, Pauly, I hate to say it, if Ben Johnson really liked Jacksonville. So insider wise, from where we were at,
we have breaking news from Thigh that they did request to interview him about 45 minutes ago. I did double check.
Yeah. So talking about those connections and stuff, how do you feel about Ian Cunningham? Do you feel like Shad Khan and that ownership, are they doing this the right way? Are they kind of taking a Bears playbook and doing this ass backwards and hiring a coach first, then getting him a GM, then, a quarterback on different timelines? Are we the parallels are starting to get a little obnoxious? How do you feel about Ian Cunningham coming over?
Yeah, unfortunately I go back to 2017 all the time and start drawing. The parallels started to be drawn there with the way that things happened, because obviously the Jags built this defense that was really good. They had this mediocre quarterback. They go to the AFC Championship. Then this next year they completely fall apart. And then the Bears do that in 2018. The Bears have this defense that helps Mitch Trubisky, this mediocre quarterback, go into the playoffs, and then everything next year it falls apart. And
random parallel thought. Trevor Lawrence, Justin Fields at the same time.
Yeah, same.
Just throwing that out, and they're lifelong rivals.
Yeah, there's a lot of drawn parallels that I've had to, as I'm covering both teams, have kind of been okay, well, the Bears have done this, and now the Jags have done this, and neither have worked. So I don't know why either team is copying the other one in certain situations. But when it comes to Ian Cunningham, I love Ian Cunningham. I know people have completely turned on Ryan Poles and have been very anti Ryan Poles for a long time. I'm still full on in support of Ryan Poles. And I also do love Ian Cunningham. And I do think in this situation, it's a win-win I do think he will be a great general manager. And I think it's a good choice for the Jacksonville Jaguars. You also get 2 third-round picks from the league. If you're the Bears for it, you get those comp picks. So that's beneficial when it comes to that. So I do think in that light, it's a win-win. I will say that from people I've talked to in the Bears world of things, Ian Cunningham is a little hesitant because he wants it to be the right kind of like order, the order of the way that the pecking order of how things are handled in the front office, just because obviously we've heard some things about what exactly was going on with Kevin Warren and Ryan Poles, and was there a little bit of clash into that in these last couple of years? Was McCaskey getting involved in that? And when you have that many hands in the cookie jar, sometimes it gets a little messy. And so the Jags just announced today too that they were hiring Tony Baselli as their EVP. So they just added another name in this cookie jar too, who I do think he's going to be a big part in this general manager hire and who they bring in, because he was a big part of them ending up getting Liam Cohen.
Would you say Tony Baselli or?
Yeah, Tony Baselli. Yeah. But I will say, and I've been very vocal about this on my show, I think the Jags have done everything ass backwards since the season ended. I mean, Trent Baalke has been a known cancer in the league for a long time. And you can go back and look at my tweets 2-3 years ago. And even at that time, I was saying, we gotta fire this guy. He's awful. His drafts suck. His free agencies are even worse. He's had like one good free agency where people think that was something to like hang your hat on. For the most part, he'll hit on like 1 or 2 draft picks a year. And like one of the years he had 13 draft picks, and you talk about like 2 of them now. He also, just in general, when it comes to coaching hires, in his time between San Francisco and Jacksonville, 6 head coaches have gotten fired under Trent Baalke. And to me, that's a red flag. Like, there, at some point, we got to figure out the common denominator here. And so it was weird that he didn't, right after the season, fire both Doug Peterson and Trent Baalke. Obviously, that ended up changing, but at that point, it was 2 weeks later, and you lost out on Ben Johnson. It's been a very stated thing that I said this back in November. I heard from people from Detroit that said Ben Johnson would not come to Jacksonville if Trent Baalke was here. Shad Khan, if I'm hearing that, Shad Khan's heard that. So he didn't fire him, and then at that point, you lose Ben Johnson to the Bears, and now you kind of have to rush things. And I think the kind of thing that made them push the button and change things was Liam Cohen came here and did an interview. And this isn't a for sure thing, but from what it sounds like is he was pretty much like, I'm not working with Trent Baalke, so I'm going to go back and keep my offensive coordinating job in Tampa. And that embarrassed Shad, because now you're sitting there, someone's taking a demotion to not come work for your franchise because of a person that is there still in the building. And the next day, Trent Baalke was fired. But now you're 2 weeks late. You're 2 weeks late to all the hirings. And now here they are. They don't even have a general manager. They have 25 days to get one, because if they don't have one by February 28th, they can't get one until after the draft. So now you're rushed into this process also of finding a GM, filling the rest of the staff. Oh, by the way, the combine is that week too. So you're now having to start worrying about going to this combine and starting to worry about free agency. That's a week and a half, 2 weeks later. So now they're just behind at this point. And so I think they did everything the wrong way. I've liked what they've done since. It's not like I've really hated anything. I actually do like Liam Cohen. I like that hire. He was third on my list of people when I was kind of like, here's the 3 coaches that I'd be okay with the Bears or the Jags hiring. He was on that list. But I do think that someone like Ian Cunningham would be good for Jacksonville, just because I do like all of his involvement, and when it comes in the things that I have heard he's had a say in Chicago. And I think they need somebody here that does have that more true football mind and the / business, though, because Tony Baselli's a football player. Tony Baselli's been in the media. He's a great man and he means a lot to this organization, but he doesn't have that experience in the front office that you would hope. So someone like Ian Cunningham would bring that. And now you've just worked with a lot of when you're working with someone like Ryan Poles, who's coming from the Kansas City organization, someone like Kevin Warren, you're learning a lot in those situations. And so in the college world and in the NFL world. So I do think it'll be beneficial for both. It'll be interesting. I think they requested 4 different guys to hire for the general manager. So we'll see where that ends up playing out. But
Yeah, it's interesting. I kind of wish I was a fly on the wall sometimes, and you could like hear some of these conversations and know some things that we don't know and can only speculate on. But one of the things that we brought up was exactly the same situation you mentioned. Like, would keeping Ryan Poles potentially disqualify some head coaches from wanting to come here if they wanted to bring their own GM? Because at the time, he had done, there's been some ups and there's been some downs, so you can make a case for either or. And so if it's going to cost you, for example, a Ben Johnson, is it worth it? And luckily we were able to still get Ben Johnson and retain Ryan Poles, and now Ryan Poles gets all the credit. And I know Thai was telling us that there's a talk about extending him for the same type of timeline as Ben Johnson, which would make sense. But it's just kind of funny how you're so close to that situation. But I do think you guys would be getting a good front office guy with Ian Cunningham. I can even go back to, I don't know if it was in Hard Knocks. It was at some point during the offseason. I remember when they wanted to trade up for Roma Dunze. Ian Cunningham was telling Ryan Poles, like, chill out, let it fall to you, let it be right. And so,
it worries me, honestly, because I think Ryan Poles gets a little emotional when you're talking about even Hard Knocks and how much he wants to keep Ian Wheeler and how much he's crying his eyes out for who's the backup safety, Paulie? Help me out. Not Adrian I think.
Colbert.
Yeah.
Adrian Colbert, right? Yeah. And then he's gonna get emotional about going up and going to grab Rome, and if Ian Cunningham is the like sound logical guy, and Tony Baselli, if I'm not mistaken, was like 9-time All-Pro in all 9 years he played or something like that. He's a lunatic. So you got your football brain there, plus your Ian Cunningham being kind of the calming voice in the room. Yeah. And then, Liam Cohen just coming out of nowhere and just, I don't know, just throwing something from the top ropes and let's go get a running back with the third pick or something. I don't know. But I don't know how Jacksonville's going to work, but that is kind of the question too with what Paulie's mentioning. And we know about meddling ownership. And I think one of the more viral videos that I really got a chuckle out of because it was just so awkward was when Shad Khan was in an interview with Trent Baalke. Yeah. And somebody asked Shad Khan, like, hey, would you consider firing your general manager to match up with a coach if that coach is worth hiring to you? And it's just kind of one of those, I'm in the room, right? Yeah. From like, from Trent Baalke. So, like, do you feel like Shad Khan is the meddler here? Is he part of the problem, or is he genuinely just kind of throwing blank checks and trying to do his best, but has no idea what he's doing?
Yeah, it's funny because that video, I host a show. The show I host here is called Helmets and Heels. My co-host on the show, Mia, was the one that asked that question.
Shout out to Mia.
Yeah, awesome. Shout out to Mia because it was fantastic. But yeah, at that point, everybody was frustrated because, like I said, everybody had been knowing, like, and I don't know if you guys remember this, but a couple years ago when like Jags fans showed up to the game in clown costumes to like mock Shad Khan. I don't know if you guys remember that, but it was a big thing. And so literally Jaguars on the final game of the season, Jaguars fans showed up fully decked out in clown costumes. And it was like to mock Shad Khan because he kept Trent Baalke. And that was 2 years ago. So in my head, I'm like, it was even at that time, people were fed up. And then the season went this way where you were projected to probably not win the South, because I think a lot of people had the Texans still winning, but you were still supposed to be in the playoffs. And it was a team that people had winning 10, 11 games, and you won 4 games. And it was embarrassing. And he should have been embarrassed for that because they put a lot of money. They put a lot of draft picks. They paid Trevor. They paid Josh Hines-Allen. They did all of these things to where people thought they were in this spot to win, and they go the opposite direction. But when it comes to Shad Khan, I've been very vocal about him. The problem with Shad is he knows zero about football. Zero. Like, he is a business guy through and through. He has multiple companies also. So he has a lot of things that he has his hands in when it comes to his bumper company, when it comes to his soccer team in London or wherever it is. And then obviously the Jaguars. And there's just a lot of things. His son is Tony Khan is the AEW, founder of AEW or whatever. So they have a lot of stuff. And Shad Khan, I think sometimes tries maybe a little too hard to be vocal in the football side when he really doesn't. And so I full on blame him for all of the hirings that have happened. The Urban Meyer situation that turned into a complete, absolute just disaster, that's fully on Shad Khan. Shad Khan was the one that was like, talked to Urban Meyer one time and was like, that's who I want. Like, we're going to do this. I trust him because he won in college and didn't get anybody else's opinion. And then we saw how that went. And then the next time when you're going through these hirings, you've kind of seen him have this like lack of knowledge when it comes to football. And with the Doug Peterson one, it felt easy because it was like, oh, well, this guy's won a Super Bowl, so let's bring him in here. And like, that's going to happen again, because look what he did with Carson Wentz and Nick Foles and all of these, all of these guys in Philly, and they beat the Patriots and all of these things. And instead of talking to people about it and being like, who does this guy fit what the mold of an offensive minded coach is right now in the league? And is he good for Trevor Lawrence? It was just kind of like the easy button. And so he's failed a lot when it comes to the hirings. And that's obvious. He kept Trent Baalke way too long. Whatever Trent Baalke, the ties or whatever he convinced him of was bad, was not good. So what I'm hoping out of this is that Shad Khan takes a step back now. And if he does hire, let's say Ian Cunningham, if it's Ian Cunningham and Tony Baselli and Liam Cohen, and those three get to be the people to make this coaching staff and really full on go into the football side of things, I feel like it'll be much more successful. Because when you have an owner that does not know about the actual game of football, there's only so much you can expect him to do. And I think he's tried to do a little too much.
Are we still talking about Shad Khan or George McCaskey? Because
what's funny though is I like to bring that example up all the time with Doug Peterson, because Howie Roseman, in my opinion, is the best GM in the league. What he's done with the Eagles over the last 25 years is incredible, in my opinion. And he had a coach like Andy Reid, who he kept around for 8 years, and even though they never won a Super Bowl, and when he got rid of him, everybody knew Andy Reid was a good coach. It just it ran stale, and he won the Super Bowl with Doug Peterson as his head coach. Nick Foles is a Super Bowl MVP after Carson Wentz got hurt. I always say it's going to take a couple things to win a Super Bowl. You need to be good, talented. You need to stay healthy, and you need to get lucky, right? And sometimes you get a little bit more lucky than the other two. They got really lucky. That doesn't happen all the time. You really got away with one, right? And so 3 years later, Howie Roseman fires Doug Peterson. I mean, you kept Andy Reid for longer, and he didn't even win you one.
Yeah.
And so that was always my red flag with him. It's like, I do trust that guy's, ability to find real coaches and, put together real teams. And even after winning one, he was still fed up with them after 3 years. And then we saw Nick Foles be third string on the quarterback 4 years after being Super Bowl MVP. So all these things over time kind of played out. And, I just never really had hope for it in Jacksonville, just because I never really thought he was that good despite the Super Bowl on his resume. So
I think it's one of those things that we all experience being too close to the team that we follow. Because then sometimes when we watch a team from the outside in going like, what were you guys thinking was going to happen? But then when you're in it, you're like the Commanders people were like, man, we definitely, guys, we have a chance. We're like, guys, like pat on the head, like great season, but this was just not going to happen kind of thing. And I think it's funny because now I'm even more like my parallel brain is just kind of going off right now with the Jags and the Bears. And props to all of us for bullying a couple of billionaires into fucking off and stop getting involved in their football operations. Credits and props to all of us for, I'm not going to cry any tears for bullying a billionaire. So we bullied them. Now they're left us alone. You guys have Tony Baselli and Ian Cunningham, and we got Kevin Warren and Ryan Poles, and we now just shut up and sign checks. And that's kind of what we ended up doing. And we have a wonder kid, young guy, quarterback whisperer. You guys hire a wonder kid, quarterback whisperer, with potential Asperger's syndrome. But and then
I did want to turn this back around to the Bears, though. Because one of the things that me and Ty talked about on Saturday, which kind of got interesting, was, he really feels that this running back room needs an upgrade, like a good upgrade. And I feel like it's going to be the most boring draft ever because of the misses you've had on the offensive line. You haven't neglected it completely. You've tried a little bit, but even, with the little effort you've put in, it has not panned out. So I think you need to put in a lot of effort on the offensive line. And so that kind of brings me to, two things. One, how do you feel about Eric Bieniemy being the running backs coach? And two, do you think the Bears draft a running back in this draft? Do they do it high? Do they do it later? Or do they not do it at all? Write it out. What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I love the Eric Bieniemy hire. Honestly, I think that this is a name that I've been following along with for I can't even since probably like 2018 pretty closely, because I remember around that time is when a lot of people he was kind of getting in this world of, are people going to hire him as a head coach? And you really started talking about him as either a high up coordinator somewhere or a head coach, and his name was out. And so it was a name that we were talking about here in Jacksonville a lot, quite a bit. And so I followed along with him very decently, and I have a podcast coming out on him probably later this week or this weekend, and so I'll get to know a little bit more of maybe where things went wrong in certain aspects, because that's also what I like to do. And so in the podcast with Dennis Allen, I did the same thing, like what is good, but also tell me what went wrong in the head coaching world for him, because those are things that we're interested in. And so I'll do the same for Bieniemy, but I think it's a good fit. I think anytime you have somebody who has experience and at multiple levels, because we do have a lot of our coaching staff now is young. Obviously, we know Ben Johnson's young. Declan Doyle's very young. So there's a lot of young pieces. And so it is nice to have somebody come in that has a little bit more experience and has been up and down in ranks, and can also, just recently in UCLA with college kids, so can still relate to these young guys that are on the team and that will be drafted this year. I do think that's a positive. And I do think that's kind of like his forte. That running back room is something that he's really, really good at. And you've seen it at almost all of his stops, and how important the running back room is in general. And I do think we've had this resurgence of running backs, and especially this last year. So it will be fun to see what they do, but I'm interested, because I think that DeAndre Swift, I don't love, but I do think that they were using him wrong. Also, I don't know, like DeAndre Swift is not going to be someone who's going to like go up the middle and force mixed tackles or break tackles. He's just not that running back. He never has been that running back. So why they were trying to get him to do that ever, I don't know. He's a very horizontal runner, but when he sees green, he's gone. That's just the type of guy he is. And when you don't have a line to help that, it's not going to work. And that's kind of what we saw, that our interior was so bad that there was no way that was happening. And so then when you go into, I just feel like we haven't even seen enough of Roschon Johnson. I was a big Roschon Johnson fan when we drafted him, and I just feel like I haven't seen nearly enough of him. So I don't know if that's the coaches. Maybe there's just not something there that, like, maybe they're not seeing what they want to see out of him, and that's why it's kind of been this back burner. But at the same time, I feel like if that was the case, then they wouldn't have gotten rid of Khalil Herbert last year. So there has to be something where they like him enough, where they felt like a DeAndre Swift and Rojo room was enough, but they just didn't handle it very well. So I will be interested. I will say the positive thing about this draft is, like, there are a lot of really good running backs in this draft. I think the Bears can still get one in the third or fourth round that is a very highly regarded running back. And so I do still think you can address the offensive line, the defensive line, and those first three rounds, and still be able to get a really good running back in the fourth round. So that is a positive. It's a good year to need a running back. I
love that answer. I couldn't agree more, for sure.
Yeah. And so that's one thing I guess you can be excited about, because I think between free agency and the beginning of this draft, going heavy in the trenches, and then you're still, like I said, we'll be able to get a guy that I think you'll still be able to use. And you can also decide, like, do you want that just full on bowling ball type of running back, or do you want somebody and we're seeing what works in Detroit. So we'll see how and Ben Johnson, that is one of the things I'm most excited about, is that Ben Johnson bringing his mind and how he saw Detroit get built and what worked and what didn't work. Bringing that to Chicago is also a big thing that I think is going to be a positive. And it's something I've talked about a lot too when it comes to Ryan Poles. And when I defend Ryan Poles to people, I'm like, what you have to think about is, in his ear this last few years has been a defensive-minded head coach. That defensive-minded head coach is going to tell you he wants defensive players. He's going to tell you he wants Kyler Gordon, and he wants Tyreek Stevenson, and he wants TJ Edwards, and he wants Tremaine Edmonds, and he wants Javon Dexter. And so that's what they did. He listened to Matt Eberflus, because Matt Eberflus is the head coach, and Matt Eberflus is probably telling him, look, if you give me these things, then I'm going to be able to make this defense to where you don't have to worry about the offense. We can slowly develop these quarterbacks, and we don't have to rush them into scoring 40 points. Now you have a guy in Ryan Poles' ear that is an offensive guy that's going to tell you, okay, like, you have a pretty dang good secondary. I think Javon Dexter is something. Let's add a little pass rush somewhere in there, because that is something that really helps Dennis Allen defenses, is like the interior pass rush. So I do see them addressing that. And then Now let's focus on the offense a little bit. You have a guy that could be a generational quarterback in Caleb Williams, but you're never going to see that if you don't start building around him. And that is what is going to be in Ryan Poles' ear now. And that's what makes me excited.
Yeah, David, I want to get your thoughts too, but I mean, they did invest in the offense though. I mean, you have a first round trade back for DJ Moore. You have Darnell Wright. You have Caleb. You have Roma Dunze. So they have put
Ryan Bates did cost a fourth.
Yeah, I think, so that's the thing about Ryan Poles, and that's how I feel. It's like you can make the case to defend him because there's been enough good to where you can lay that out. You can also make the case against him, and that's why it's so 50-50 because you could kind of draw those things up either way. Yeah, Ryan Bates was another thing where it's like, you target this guy for 2 years, and then, he winds up.
That's where I get into
he was a lineman himself. It's like you should be able to evaluate offensive lineman at least accurately.
Yeah.
And I'm sorry, David, go ahead.
That's kind of where I fall with that, Ryan Poles being the emotional part of it, and Ian Cunningham always being his balance. I always thought that Ryan Bates was maybe more of a personal move. Where he really wanted him at first, and then he got, the RFA tag from the Bills, and then they retained him, and then he's like, you know what?
So he's like, I'm going to get this guy.
Yeah, there's nothing going to stop me this time. I'm going to give him a fifth for it. And then the whole time, I believe Mitch Morse got cut 2 days later, who was Ryan Bates's first string position.
Yeah.
Why? You could have just signed him for money, and then you guys got him. And that's kind of where I always stood on that, where you made it personal, Ryan. So, a lot of my points too that you guys are kind of talking about is, me and Carl will kind of do a little bit of a mock draft. And my whole thing with Ryan Poles, and I guess it's going to change a little bit, my opinion, if he does get this extension that people like Courtney Cronin are reporting on, because I always felt that this offseason was going to be painfully cookie cutter for Ryan Poles, because I thought that with all the slightly different things that he was kind of doing and trying to move, Tyler Booker, for example, should not be a 10th overall draft pick. However, if you get Trey Smith by some miracle, you put in some center, Tyler Booker is just the most cookie cutter answer that you can get at left guard and just plug and play. I personally just watched him. I'm not a huge fan. I don't know how much of draft stuff you watch, but I like your answer on get a running back later. But I feel like depending on how much Ben Johnson is in Ryan Poles' ear, how empowered now Ryan Poles feels with the contract extension to get creative. It could be a non-creative
trade
move
up for Jahmyr Gibbs, right?
Yeah, exactly. Like Ben Johnson trading up for a running back, you that's people who feel really secure in their fucking jobs. Yeah. So that's where I worry about Ryan Poles in this offseason. And I do have more to say about the assistant coaches, because Paul and our friend Carl talked about their favorite assistant coaches and coaching moves, because this staff is looking excellent. Not once, Paul, did you guys mention Al Harris, who's my favorite pickup of any of the pickups as assistant coaches right now this whole offseason. You guys did not mention him once, and I was just
lay it out there, man.
I was screaming at the YouTube channel, just being like, Al Harris
now you got your original content here.
Combined with Dennis Allen is just a nightmare matchup with exotic 4-man blitzes, not even blitzes, but just 4-man stunts, and linebackers just pushing on one side of the line, 2 guys dropping back, and then you get these corners who we already have that are good, and now they get to play aggressive and wait till Cam Jordan gets here because he's coming, and then you get to throw all this stuff in. But that's back to the Ryan Poles thing of it all. How do you? I don't know how much you follow into the draft about the Bears specifically, but I see these mock drafts like Daniel Jeremiah, Tyler Booker at 10, and I'm like, man, that's just so goddamn cookie cutter. That's a guy who you should take at 20, at 18. Can you trade back? If you're ballsy and you love a guy, I'm blanking on the name right now, from LSU, forgot his name. Don't quote me on that. But guys like Kelvin Banks or guys that you fall in love with, how empowered are you going to be to make that move versus you're going to take Tyler Booker at 10 just to fit that cookie cutter in your needs rather than be risky and go for stuff.
Is it Will Campbell?
Yeah.
Will Campbell. Thank you, from LSU.
Yeah. So for me, the unfortunate part with this draft from the people that I have talked to, and I haven't fully got into my draft stuff yet, usually right after probably late February, I start doing a series where it's okay, who could the Bears draft at 10? And then I'll go on and beyond the 10 pick. And I'll talk to people from all over that cover different schools and get a little bit more into it. But what I've talked to about the just kind of basic of this draft from people is that it kind of sucks this year to pick in the top 10. There's nobody, maybe outside of Travis Hunter, that people feel are true blue chip players. So draft what you need is what a lot of people are telling me at this point. Like, if your biggest need is a left guard, go get that left guard, because at this point in that top 10, you're not going to be getting anybody that is at least what we've seen in these last couple drafts. And so that could change. We have the combine coming up and stuff like that. And so maybe people start kind of sprouting a little bit more. I was talking a lot about this Dennis Allen. And so the podcast I just dropped did part of it's on Dennis Allen. And I talked to Ross Jackson that covers the Saints and that. But then I also talked to Mickey Spagnola, who covers the Cowboys, on Al Harris. And I agree with you. I love this. I feel like the secondary, who I already think is pretty good, is going to be so fun to watch with Dennis Allen and Al Harris. And then you put in, who I actually like, Bill Johnson, on that defensive line, who pretty much was a big part of who Aaron Donald is and the development of him. And that's the type of defensive line he likes too. Those big, like, kind of burly guys who I think Javon Dexter and Andrew Billings fit into. So I do think it will be interesting to see that. And so, like, if in some crazy world Mason Graham is still there, like, get him. Like, that is somebody that I'm like, in a heartbeat, go grab someone like that, because that is just, and I know everyone's going to be like, oh, we still need offensive line. That is a can't miss, especially in a Dennis Allen defense, of somebody that's going to fit and mesh so perfectly in how he does. Because to your point, he does a lot of 4-2-5. He loves the three corners. Obviously, Kyler Gordon's going to be a huge part of this defense. So it's going to be really fun to see what he does with him and sending Kyler in the pass rush, because he likes to use his nickel slot corners to go after the quarterback a lot. And then he uses those safeties too. We talked a ton about Kevin Byard and Brisker. Brisker said he's cleared, so hopefully Brisker's good next year, because those two together in this secondary too, I think, are going to be huge playmakers. So I think you do have to this year say the trenches are important. You have to focus on the trenches. And so at that 10th pick, unfortunately, it might be a little boring. And I think that when we were in that draft where you drafted Darnell Wright, a lot of people got real angry that it wasn't Jalen Carter. But if we didn't get Darnell Wright that year, we would have been sitting here like, okay, now we need 4 offensive linemen, because there's nobody. And, like, some people don't even really like Braxton, honestly. I do. I think Braxton's feasible. Can it be better? Yes. But I do think you have 2 tackles that you can trust, but the whole interior needs to be gutted right now, especially since it looks like they're not re-signing Tevin. So I do agree with you.
I was going to ask if you overpay and re-sign Tevin.
What's
love your value? What's your top value on him? Like, what would you think would be the most?
I know it's so hard, because I love Tevin Jenkins. This is also an emotional thing, because I love Tevin Jenkins as, like, a person. And I think he fits the mentality of, like, he'll defend the quarterback, but he's kind of, like, goofy and fun. He's really good when he's healthy, but there's no way I'm paying $12 million to a guy who hasn't been able to play one season. And that's what it's projected at. Yeah. I could see, like, an 8-9, like maybe 8 or 9. I don't know what Tevin is willing to do. I don't know what other teams will think. I don't know if teams are going to look at this and be like, this guy's battle. And it's not one thing. It's different injuries constantly that he's having to deal with, and concussion this last year. So it's scary. There's a lot of things kind of going on. So maybe other teams are telling them, like, maybe if he does kind of listen around a little bit and they're like, no, we're not going to give you that, maybe he'll take a little less. I don't know. But even if that's the case, you still have to try and address it, because the chances are Tevin's not going to be there all game. And these last 2 years, you've had 14, 15 different formations on the offensive line because guys couldn't stay healthy, and you can't keep surviving that way.
Yeah,
sorry, I just wanted to hit this real quick so there's no confusion for Carl in the chat. Dennis Allen didn't cross over with Aaron Donald. Bill Johnson, our defensive line coach, defensive assistant, was his defensive line coach in LA.
Yeah, the Rams.
So that's where the crossover is there. But
yeah, David
Taylor made me feel a lot better about picking at 10, I guess, right now. So
I guess
I'm sorry it's gonna be boring, but
if you're gonna just pure draft strategy alone, if you're going to pick top 10, you better be as close to it being a for sure thing as you possibly can. Like, this player has to work out and sign another contract here, because when that doesn't happen, when they're only here through the rookie contract, regardless of what position it is, it hurts. It hurts a lot. You know what I mean? So I always say the draft is kind of a crapshoot for all teams, especially when you go back and look through drafts. You can pick any team and improve their draft strategy with hindsight, So there's always gems throughout it all. So I'm one that's usually in a pretty conservative thought of trading back, getting more picks. Last year, I thought, was a good example of that, where, you didn't have a single defensive player taken until pick 16.
Yeah.
So you could have dropped back, acquired another pick, had your pick of the litter at defense and still picked up a center with the additional second round pick that you
That
got.
one, that
Or,
draft
you
will
know.
never, we and you are
That
not,
was crazy.
Paul and I are not combine draft, college gurus, but
Right.
everybody that we thought was going to be a good player, and we were just blown away by that whole draft, just watching Leatu Latu fall to 15 and then like Jared Verse fall to like whatever it was, 19. And we're like, guys, I'm sorry to break it to you. I don't care how late they were drafted. The first or second best defensive player taken at 19 is a good fucking value.
Yeah, you
like,
can't tell me that
ends
one
up
of these
being that
guys
good.
isn't going to pan out. You know what I mean? It's your job to go out and find the right one. But
this is a draft where. Sorry, go ahead, Taylor.
Oh, sorry. I was in love with Jared first. I was like hammering the table, and I wanted Rome Odunze, so I kept saying like, if Rome's not there at 9, do what you like, draft Jared Verse. And people kept being like, you want to take him at 9? I'm like, yes, like I would take Jared Verse at 9. Give it to me right now. And then obviously the Dallas Turner thing was whatever, and I'm like, but Jared Verse can do all of it. Like he sets the edge so much better than what Dallas Turner can. He can still get to the quarterback. And so watching Jared Verse this year, I'm like, oh, I knew he was going to be a stud. I knew it.
That was he was just the most balanced player in that whole draft. He was good he could get you a mediocre pass rush, get you 10 sacks, plus like set the edge on runs and stuff. I hate to break it to Oxy Brodone. Abdul Carter's not making it past 2. So yeah, don't even entertain 10. Well, what I'm watching so far, and like I've focused so far, I've watched like 5 hours of just basically offensive linemen so far. And I watch these guys and I'm just like, you're basically drafting Braxton Jones.
Yeah.
They're like borderline undersized, really good technicians, really good hand placement. They're clever, but they're not like physical beasts and stuff like that.
Yeah. So you're saying just wait until the 5th round.
Well, so me and Paul are big proponents of like we grew up on Bill Belichick and stuff like that. So we're just always like, this is probably the best draft to ever go back. Somebody wants Ashton Genty at 10. Yeah. And you can get down to 18 and pick up a 3rd round pick. And now you have 4 picks from 18 to 58. Like that's the dream this year. Because I think part of the reason is like, yet again, we need to pump the brakes. Paulie and I, if you've ever seen our channel, we're much more of you can call us negative, but we're realistic people on Bears fans. Like this is a Bears fan because we love them. But last year when people are saying 5,000 yards for Caleb, everyone's 1,000-yard receiver, 14-3, we were like, we're struggling to get to 9-8.
Yeah.
And we were called haters and stuff like that. And then
just reminded me too of I'm sorry, go ahead.
No, just to wrap up that point is like, I think because right now, if you're not riding the Ben Johnson wagon right now and this coaching staff, I'm sorry to break it to everybody. Next year's not the Super Bowl year. Yeah. If it's maybe in 2 years, this is the year you go and get 5 guys that this coaching staff can coach up for the following year. That they get to home grow and get as moldable pieces and not just fix this overnight because people are like, well, we should take Ashton Genty at 10 because that'll fix all the problems. It's like, guys, what are we talking about here? What are we you getting a running back at 10 with who? Who's blocking for him?
That's why I'm saying that's why I'm saying that Tevin Jenkins has leverage in the situation. Although, like I've heard that number 8-9 million thrown around, it's just somebody else is going to pay him more.
I'm going to tell you one thing, Paulie, right now. Tyler Booker,
if you're getting 12.
Absolutely.
Yes. So like the top guards in this league are getting paid what, 20 more, north of 20. So like David, I know you mentioned there was a guard on Miami that like they signed his contract. They knew he was only good for 12 games. I forget his name, but and that's kind of what this is. I think like 12, 13, if you can do it for 3 years, guarantee like a year and a half of it or 2 years of it. I don't think that's the worst deal based off the situation you're in. I mean, you need some type of continuity here. Yeah. You can't just sit there and go into it with all rookies. You're still going to need to, overpay somebody else in free agency for it too. So I don't think, at the end of the day, I don't think that couple million for what it brings you, I think, even though he's not going to survive all season, I think it may be worth it. I think you could waste money in the NFL a lot worse ways than
where I see this going, and I see the realistic part of it because it's so cookie cutter, and this is kind of what I've been alluding to with Ryan Poles. And God bless George McCaskey for genuinely just handing over a blank checkbook this offseason. I think if you have never seen us, Taylor, I am maybe George McCaskey's biggest hater. I make fun of him almost every episode.
I get it.
And like props where props are due. Blank checkbook and leave. Because I would love to know the financials of this coaching staff. It's probably one of the most expensive coaching staffs in the league, period. But realistically in the NFL, it's the only place where there's no cap. There's no, cap. So you can get a competitive advantage if you're willing to spend the money on coaching. And right now, I think people are starting to feel that with the Bears. Yeah. And so with
part of the issue last year with Cliff Kingsbury, you couldn't bring him here because you'd have to pay him
more money than he wanted more money than Eberflus is making. So it was kind of like how are you going to pay the second in command more than the head coach? So props to George.
Which I know Ben Johnson was making more than Dan Campbell too before this last season. So that may have been like a hesitation last year too, because I know there were rumors that Ben Johnson was interested in Chicago last year. They ended up keeping Eberflus. So I wonder how much of it was too that they're like, well, he's making more than Dan Campbell. Are you ready for that? And George being cheap, I'm with you. Believe me, I've bashed George McCaskey so much and for so long. And so the day when the news broke, when the Bears got Ben Johnson, we had like a breaking news podcast. And I just started by clapping. I was like, good job, George. Cause I didn't think you were going to do it. I really didn't.
Yeah. Well, David said the quote of the day. I'm going to name an episode of this. It's going to be the summer of George. Yes. I love it.
Seinfeld reference. If you're a Seinfeld fan.
Yeah, I love Seinfeld.
But no, like and this is where we're really going to see if George is going to follow through on the summer of George, because if Trey Smith does hit free agency, and you can ask our friend Carl, Ryan Poles might have been playing 4-dimensional chess, letting Matt Eberflus, hang himself with his own petard this whole season so that he can, because again, I don't think any of this happens if Matt Eberflus goes 8-9 this season. I don't think any of this happens. George McCaskey needed such a catastrophe and to get bullied so hard for him to do this. He needed to go home and cry after people are telling him to sell the team. Yeah. And so we're going to see how much George follows through on the summer of George. And if Trey Smith somehow reaches free agency, that's going to be my okay, I'm done. George, you win. I'm done. If you're willing to pay a guard 25 million, I think that's a sign of things to come. I wouldn't be surprised much if there is some sort of guard swap with Kansas City. If we get Trey Smith, they're a rehab team for Tevin Jenkins. Hey, Tevin, we need 12 games out of you. Here's 14 million plus incentives. I wouldn't be shocked by something like that. And it's just like a guard swap. I'm not saying for draft compensation or anything. And I don't think the Chiefs are dummies. I think they'll probably, like our friend Carl says, they're going to franchise tag him. They're going to get something for him. But if you could get Tevin Jenkins in a second over there for Trey Smith for 24 million, I'll take that.
Yeah, I know a guy named Eric Bieniemy that's definitely going to be like, hey, if Trey Smith's available, go get him. Yeah,
and that's part of my cookie cutter point is everything is just so laid out. Trey Smith was teammates with Darnell Wright for 2 years on Tennessee. Yeah. Eric Bieniemy was his offensive coordinator and one of his first mentors. Yeah. He's a running back coach now. I mean, again, I think the Bears and Ben Johnson and what Ben Johnson is proving is the Bears are kind of becoming that destination, which is crazy to say. I think Ben Johnson, thank God we got him, because no. people are choosing to come here. I didn't see this coming one bit. One of my biggest questions that I had on Ben Johnson, because Paul and I, from the very beginning, we were Mike Vrabel guys.
We don't want to keep you here past the clock either, so if anything is going to have to be left. I mean, I don't know if you have much more time left, but if you have to go at any point, just let us know. Okay. And
yeah, I'll say a few more. It's okay. Yeah, I'm on the East Coast, so it's a little later, and I have to get up crazy early because I work in radio. So
for sure.
We'll be quick. Just Vrabel guy, and then Ben. We were Vrabel guys, and then when we got Ben Johnson, my biggest question was, what are his ties in the NFL, and can he put together a coaching staff? Because he is a one-stop guy. He was just in Detroit. He doesn't really have that kind of lineage or coaching tree to build a coaching staff, and that question's been answered. There is still one. None of these guys have ever worked together before. I need people to kind of pump the brakes on that part too. You are assembling the assistant coach Avengers here. None of them have ever done it together. None of them. There's no overlap with any of these guys. So there's part of my, that's a great name. Part of my worry with Ben Johnson. But I think, again, the cookie cutter part is Trey Smith is lined up for you. If he hits free agency, you better go get him. Tyler Booker, I'm going to tell you right now, is an upgrade over Tevin Jenkins. Mm-hmm. He's just about as solid. There's definitely little bits of things that I didn't really like, but so that's kind of my rant on Ben Johnson and the coaching staff and the cookie cutter aspect of who we're going to get.
Yeah, it is interesting because since I've started doing some of these coaching podcasts, there's not overlap of these guys, but what it is Dan Campbell's time in New Orleans has like sprayed this tree. It's kind of like formed this tree of guys from the Saints, and that's what it's led to. And I think that Dan Campbell, all of the connections and people that he worked with when he was in New Orleans, excuse me, and since that time it's now kind of started sprouting into all of these other things because there's multiple guys now that have been in New Orleans at different times, but still they're at some point working with Sean Payton, and then Sean Payton takes Declan Doyle with him to the Broncos. Bill Johnson was there a while ago, obviously. And so there is that weird now like pipeline with the Saints, but I'm not mad about it because it was both all of the things when you start to connect with Dennis Allen, with Bill Johnson, with Declan Doyle's time there. They all have these kind of, at the time when they were focusing on this position groups, it was some of the best position groups that they were coaching at the time. So it's fun to kind of look at those connections of, yeah, there's not overlap, but if Dan Campbell is the person that's kind of starting to sprout this new tree almost in a way, I'm here for it.
Yeah, and it's definitely that. Like, there's a lot of Sean McVay offense in this entire league, and Ben Johnson's kind of just doing, kind of like his own thing in a way, and it's interesting. And so, one of the things that I heard, Rex Ryan say, he said, I'd hire him over me. He's like, and I think I'm pretty damn good. He's like, but this guy might be something else. And so that was nice to hear from a guy who, I personally, I like his opinions, and I wanted Vrabel too, but looking at it now, I don't know if Vrabel would have been able to put as good of a coaching staff together as Ben Johnson has done. And so that's something that's definitely shocked me. I didn't think that, he was going to do it, but I did hear him say in an interview that this last year did help him prepare a lot and help him plan out what exactly his program is going to be like and kind of try and think things through a little bit and not rush it. And that might've been, the best thing overall, because it looks like, he had some things in place already for the wheels to start turning as soon as the season was over.
Yeah.
Also, I think it's a credit for him to know where his weaknesses are as a first-time coach and all that stuff. And he's hiring a lot of former players and former head coaches and guys who've been around the block before, which I think is a massive thing, because not every team is in a vacuum. Like what worked for Dan Campbell and the rah stuff and bite kneecap stuff with those specific groups of players is definitely what's going to work. But even if it was Dan Campbell 1-for-1 coming to Chicago, I don't know if that transfers. So maybe like Ben Johnson is just kind of being a little bit more cognizant of, I need to just kind of feel this out from the beginning, bring in people who can help me fill in my gaps and kind of go from there, which is yet another like props to Ben Johnson. Like it's a hard thing for people to know where their weaknesses are and what they need help with. And it seems like he's very much getting those people.
Yeah. And one of the things that I talked about too in my recent podcast was that I do feel like Ben Johnson is hiring people too that he knows already mixes with the personnel that the Bears have now. So he's thinking like, okay, and this is an example of like the Dennis Allen, Al Harris, Bill Johnson. When it comes to the defensive side of the ball, the players that they have, when it comes to a Javon Dexter, when it comes to a Brisker, when I just talked to Ross Jackson, I mentioned about the Saints, and he said Brisker was somebody that they wanted very badly. The Saints were after Brisker in the draft. That was one of the guys they wanted to draft. Bears drafted him one pick before Alontae Taylor, who the Saints ended up getting. But Brisker was who they had their eyes on and went one pick before. Dennis Allen was a huge fan of Jaquan Brisker. Dennis Allen was a huge fan of Kyler Gordon. He mentioned that, one of the first players he mentioned when he got here. And Dennis Allen was a huge fan of Javon Dexter. So these are three players that Ben Johnson's probably talking to Dennis Allen is like, what do you see in this defense that you like? And Dennis Allen's naming players that he wanted to draft already that fit the scheme and everything he can already do. And so that's what's positive too, because I feel like we're looking at this. They're bringing people in here that already mesh, and you're not going to have to go and change everything as a whole. They are coming in here knowing what players they like and how they build around that. And yes, you're going to add other pieces, and there's definitely some holes to fill. But at the same time, there's a foundation. And I think that Ben Johnson wants to bring people in here that appreciate and know this foundation is something that they can build upon rather than having to like destroy and start over.
One thing that I've always thought about is like one of the things you can't medically prove is if somebody has a headache or not. I could tell you I have a headache, and you can't really prove it or not prove it. And so like, that Jaquan Brisker concussion, I've never seen anything keep a guy out that long. Do you think his real concussion was Matt Eberflus? Like, that's really what, at the end of the day, he was just like, "Listen, I got a
it is a
headache.
lot of
I
people's
can't come
headache.
back. I can't come back." 'Cause, I mean, every guy in the league's got a headache at this point. They all just bash their heads in, right? But
Yeah.
hopefully he comes back healthy and is able to sustain that health, and that's not an issue moving forward.
Yeah.
Like, that's not an actual medical thing, because he was out for
It was a long time. Yeah.
a long time. Yeah.
Well, because
So
it was like 5 weeks he missed maybe, and then they put him on IR after that. So it was a long time, and it was scary because when you hear those ones about anything brain, you start kind of freaking out, or if it's, hope it's not neck or something like that. And so those are scary. From what I've seen, he's posted a lot on Twitter saying he's been cleared for a while, he's good to go, he'll be fine. So we'll see what that looks like, because Jaquan Brisker is a difference maker when he's out there. So you definitely want him to be able to return, especially what it looks like with him and Byard early on in the season. It looked like it was about to be a lot of fun. So it kind of sucked when he got hurt. And I think some of the guys like an Elijah Hicks stepped in decently, but it's not a Brisker.
yeah, I actually felt like he had hit. I'm sorry, David, last thing. I actually felt like he had hit a wall last year. And going into this year, I wasn't sure if he was going to, be able to keep progressing. And he did early on. He made some plays in the first 4 weeks that were pretty impressive. Sorry, go ahead, David.
Oh, no. Talking about what you were saying, I think what we saw with Jaquan Brisker was you can't have two wild cards in the back there. Mm-hmm. And Eddie Jackson, what we were always commenting about was that Eddie Jackson was trying to play the wild card game, which forced Brisker to be that safety blanket and make sure he's that last line of defense, which is not his game at all. Yeah. And then now Kevin Byard being just this like super stable, free safety, rangy safety that can be that last blanket of defense. And then it allowed Jaquan Brisker to just start, going balls to the wall, just doing what he's good at. It is a weird concept though with this Dennis Allen year and kind of how it overlaps though, because I've been thinking about it we talked about it last offseason. Do you re-sign Kyler? Do you re-sign Jaquan? And it's such a prove it year for both of them that I kind of worry about how this is all going to gel and shake out, because it's always good to have good years, but I don't know, going into this offseason if you had asked me if any player was like the least reliable, I wouldn't want to, and maybe we could find a replacement for it, probably be Jaquan Brisker, as much as I hate to say it, because he's just not been consistent enough and healthy enough and all that stuff. So I do hope he's good. But I feel like it's such a prove it year for him. It's kind of a shame.
Yeah. And I think that because of like some injury stuff, it makes you question. It's the same thing with Tevin, where there's moments where you see they're really, really good in the potential, but you have to weigh that in certain moments. And I do think that in the secondary in general, like I said, when he did go out, everybody was like, oh, this is going to have a massive drop. And I do think that Elijah Hicks played well. I really like Terrell Smith, and unfortunately he's had some injury issues too, but he's somebody that I could see them kind of being able to rely on a little more and meshing him in, especially in this Dennis Allen defense, because he does similar to where we talk about last year. They talked about a little bit how it's going to be a little more free flowing between not like a true free and strong safety, but let them kind of just vibe and do their thing. And that's what it looked like they were doing earlier. Then they kind of had to switch because it wasn't Brisker and Byard anymore. From what I've heard, Dennis Allen's secondaries are very similar. So it will be interesting how quick, like you said, if Jaquan's healthy and he's coming out, how quickly we're seeing that little glimpses that we saw earlier between the two. But if they don't, if they're worried at all, then you are going to want to see what you have behind that. I have said to go ahead and draft a safety at some point, because I do think you want to have a backup plan this year and not kind of have to like go back to the fire just in case.
I also think that Terrell Smith point is really, really good, because if Al Harris and what Dennis Allen do, when you think back even on those Saints defenses where they play a lot of that man-to-man stuff with messy fronts and exotic, 4-2, like you said, the 4-2-5s and everything. If Al Harris can't save Tyreek Stevenson, nobody can. Yeah. And even coming out of Miami, I remember first thing I texted Paulie when he asked me, good pick or not? And I'm like, this dude's hips are awful. This guy cannot turn inside of a phone booth. So it's like he's going to get absolutely toasted on man routes when he's got to go like man-to-man against like two guys. Jalen's fine. I think Terrell Smith is a lot better suited for that kind of role. He's like that good bump and run with like quick fluid hips and kind of runs, with guys. Tyreek is a backpedaler, play things in front of you. I just don't think he's going to translate very well to this defense. He's probably, to me, he's one of those like surprise cuts of the offseason.
Oh, really?
It's going to be a contract year for TJ Edwards too again. Like, what do you do there? because he signed a 3-year. I think this is his last year in 2025. So
I think he plays that Demario Davis role perfectly. Demario Davis is like an inside linebacker who can be thrown in on those messy fronts and actually blitz. He's going to go. I think your bigger concern is Tremaine Edmonds because he just does not fit any type of Dennis Allen. He's more of an outside linebacker in like a Dennis Allen scheme because he's going to be just like rangy and then backpedaling. Yeah. And then TJ Edwards is playing that Demario Davis role where he just kind of muddles it up, blitzes, kind of backpedals and does a little bit of like tricky stuff. But if you have to, I think Tremaine Edmonds, I always get them goddamn Terrell,
TJ Edwards,
and Tremaine Edmonds. I think Tremaine is going to be more expendable. And again, there's a lot of moves that you can do to grow cap space right now. Gerald Everett cuts, Ryan Bates cuts, $12 million, $13 million are freed up. If Dennis Allen loves him in training camp, you extend TJ Edwards before he even gets to next year.
Yeah, I agree.
I think you give him a 3-4 year deal.
I agree. I love TJ Edwards and I love the fit. I think we'll see a lot more of Edwards, Edmonds, and Sanborn on the field at the same time too, because that's something Dennis Allen did a lot in New Orleans, is having those 3 linebackers out there. So I like Sanborn too, especially there's certain moments last year where I was like, Sanborn's playing better than Tremaine Edmonds is at this point. Just get him out there. But we'll see how much he mixes things up because he does do some funky stuff when it comes up front. And like, I'm excited for that. I'm excited to just see like 7 guys going crazy up front and you're like, what's happening? But then you're getting to the quarterback and it's been forever since we felt like we could do that on a consistent basis.
Yeah, I really want to see some production for Cole Kmet. I thought he was so underused this last year. That
I was like, it starts with actually getting him targets.
Yeah, definitely. And, I actually thought about, like, if I ever saw him in person, what would I say to him? And it would be, dude, it was bullshit when you got no targets. Those games were the ones that really killed. Like, why?
I mean,
this is where my point came in when I was kind of poking at you, Taylor, at the beginning, where I'm like, how does this translate? How does Evan Ingram role translate? Because I need to see some Evan Ingram routes for Cole Kmet this year.
Yeah, and I hope we see that. I mean, I think the way that the Lions use Laporta and their tight ends, you'd hope Ben Johnson would bring some of that over here. I felt just like fully like bamboozled by Shane Waldron because in my head I was like, everything we were hearing is going to be all these like 2 tight end sets and like Everett and Kmet are going to be a huge part of this offense. And then like, I don't know if I ever saw Jared Everett and then Cole Kmet. There was a 4-game stretch where I think he had 2 targets and I'm like, there's no way that Cole Kmet should ever be getting the ball that little. And then you have a game like the Jags game when it was like the Cole Kmet day. And I was like, that's what you need to do. Like the way they were using Cole Kmet in that game is the way you need to use him all of the time. It just never made sense. So I do hope Ben Johnson is coming here realizing that he has between obviously DJ. I don't know what's happening with Keenan. It sounds like he's not coming back. We'll see what happens with that. But with DJ and Rome and Cole, those 3 should like just 100% be your focal points of your offenses. And they each do something a little bit different and have different strengths. And Shane had no idea what he was doing with using the weapons that they had.
You did also name the front row of Ben Johnson's press conference right there too. So
yeah, that's true.
Yeah, definitely.
It translates well for them. Yeah.
I think we saw the red flags with Shane Waldron early on. What David, I think you said it. What was Jackson's Myth and Jigba's line?
Yeah.
Are we live?
Yeah, are we live? Yeah. Should I really say this or should I say the nice answer? And then, when we paid attention to what some of the Seattle fans were saying when we got him, it was that, he struggled to get a consistent running game going. Mm-hmm. We did see that kind of play out as well. So, unfortunately, that didn't work out. But there hasn't been really, too many red flags here with the Ben Johnson coaching staff so far. It seems like every hire is a good hire, and then even some of the guys that do have red flags, they're not in position to really do anything but coach, a position or a part of the process. So, it's coming together, and then hopefully it will translate to the field, and we'll see some wins this year and some good offensive football. So I know we're running up against the clock. Yeah, we don't want to keep you any later here. So I don't know if you want to let everybody know once again where they can find you and your content. And thank you so much for joining us tonight. We appreciate your time and all your opinions.
Yeah, of course. I appreciate you having me on. Yeah, you'll find me on Twitter at Taydol1010XL. My podcast is called Making Monsters. You'll find that Spotify, YouTube, wherever you listen to your podcast. That's through Second City Gridiron. So either way, however you want to search it, Second City Gridiron or Making Monsters. If you do want to hear Jags content at all, or maybe the tie-ins and the parallels between the Jags and Bears, my show is called Helmets and Heels. I'm on noon to 2 Eastern time, Monday through Friday. And that is, you can stream that also. If you go to 1010xl.com, you can find that on there.
Cool. Yeah. Awesome. Thank you so much. So,
yeah,
bear down.
Bear down.
And Duval.
Yeah, Duval. we got to do that for sure. So,
there you go.
Yeah, she was a good guest. I know she didn't want to stay too late, so I didn't want to keep dragging it out with her.
No, I absolutely agree.
Yeah, she's got a job she's got to do in the morning. It is what it is.
It's 9 o'clock over there too. So
yeah, exactly. So, yeah, definitely some good takes. Awesome guest. Glad she can, get the time together to come join us. And yeah, I know we're going on an hour 15 here, but do you have anything else? Because,
I mean, I'm more, I'm reacting a little bit to where, you guys have been, from Saturday with you and Carl. I watched that whole show, great show, and just kind of reacted to that. I was
starstruck right now. Look at that.
Yeah, make sure you follow her immediately.
Yeah, definitely follow her, and she's got good content. That's why I wanted to invite her on, because I listened to her on the podcast and I was like, oh man, like she knows what she's talking about, and then she definitely does media content professionally. So. Very
intelligent and very good at her job. So
for sure.
Some of the things I was just thinking about I wanted to add. I was screaming, like I said, you guys kept talking about I think it was Declan Doyle mostly. Bieniemy really was a thing to talk about. Dude, this I mean, I hate to beat a dead horse here and all that stuff, but like Bieniemy, great hire, overqualified clearly. I don't know necessarily how he is going to be. That's my biggest thing, man, is like all I've heard from Bieniemy is he's kind of a hard ass. And all I know about Antoine Randall is he's kind of a hard ass. So maybe that's what Ben Johnson needs, because he's just not willing to be that guy. So again, I keep being impressed by every step of the way of Ben Johnson, his coaching staff right now. Today, when they hired, the offensive line coach was Dan Roushar. Like everything I hear and research about these guys, because I don't know them off the top of my head, I'm blown away. Like I said, the biggest thing I can say still to anyone who is a little bit more like me and just kind of wait and see approach, because I've been hurt too much, is none of these guys have really ever worked together. So I think for anybody who as excited as we are, I think the thing I would recommend for people we see on Twitter, just be patient, because I don't think this is the year where everything gels. The same way that these players need to be like 2-3 year players, like Caleb Williams needs 2-3 years to be properly evaluated. I think this coaching staff, being brand new, needs like 2 to 3 years to gel. If they hit it off right away, the other part of that is like, I think they're gonna get plucked by other teams, because this is a fucking superstar. This is the assistant coach Avengers. I mean, they're literally getting like the number 1 or number 2 coach from every team. I read Dallas media freaking out about Al Harris getting plucked, because Al Harris was an absolute dynamite head coach. They tried to promote him to assistant head coach over there even, or they had him as an assistant head coach. He got plucked. Dennis Allen's probably a pretty good hire. The other part that I just am tempering my expectations with is we are starting to talk about like where these guys are coming from, and the Saints and all these people. And it's like the same way we got bamboozled by Shane Waldron, where, the writing was on the wall and Jackson Smith and Jigba freaking out and being like, no. We're also talking about the coaching staff from the Saints, right? Like, it's the Saints. They haven't been good for many years. Maybe it was a combination of a lot of things, right? And the lack of quarterback, because Derek Carr sucked. The defense was aging. There was no cap space. The draft picks are bad. I get it. But at the end of the day, we are plucking the staff of the Saints here on defense.
Yeah. And dude, there's worse organizations out there that have.
There are, for sure.
Yeah. So it's not the worst plan, in my opinion. I think at the end of the day, it's good enough. And like I said, I'll look more for the talent on the field to be put in better positions to try and succeed. And I think, dude, I think Dennis Allen, is going to be good enough. You know, like we were saying that on Saturday. Like
I
Matt
do.
Eberflus was a top. Yeah, so is he. And you know, the way you become better than that is when your players go off and succeed. And so, you know, that the hot pitch today all over the internet, which it's funny because we've had these conversations in the past about like Micah Parsons, right? So like obviously Myles Garrett wants a trade. So now, you know, the funny thing about this is you could go through the entire NFL and there's not one team that doesn't get better by adding Myles Garrett to their roster. So, like at the end of the day, who isn't at least willing to entertain it? Like everybody is. It just depends what you could, you know, dish out and deal and afford. And like once again, like is this an option for that? And would that work out? Would Myles Garrett to Chicago work out? Because you know me, I wouldn't want to spend what he costs. Although, man, I mean, he is undeniably.
I don't really want to entertain the Myles Garrett stuff
No.
today because I think it's going to be talked about a lot, and I almost don't want to even hype train it on the first day.
Okay, that's fair.
To like comment with Carl saying like, what am I talking about? Really, honestly, dude, all I'm talking about is like these are the ways that you can temper your expectations, if there are ways to temper them. Because I'm a secret 8, 9 out of 10 excitement for this staff. I just can't let myself get there yet. And if I'm going to temper my expectations in any way, shape, or form, those are the two ways. Because this is like one of the best coaching staffs I've seen maybe in my lifetime, and definitely on the Bears. And it's probably a top 5 to 10 coaching staff in the league right now. I don't know. The only way I can temper my expectations is if we're talking about an underperforming Saints team from the last 2 years, which Carl's right. They were the same staff when they were good with Drew Brees and Sean Payton. But the last few years, they have been a little bit.
I said this too,
worse.
though. Like with this division, it's been a historically tough division. I know it kind of popped in the playoffs, and everybody's like, "Oh, it's inflated." Okay, even if it takes a step back, it's still a damn tough division. Like, let's not pretend these other 3 teams aren't going to sit there and still be good teams. You know what I mean? I know Detroit's losing a lot, but you know their window might still be open to do something. The Packers are in an interesting position, paying Jordan Love, and you know the Vikings are in an interesting position with their quarterback situation with JJ McCarthy or Sam Darnold, but they're still all good teams, and I think no year is a cakewalk, right? So, like I said, I know I got to go out there and see it is such a lame answer, and you can ride it out till the end of the year, right? You totally could, and that's what it comes down to at the end of the day, because you do have to just go out there and see it. Like you could hype it up all you want. You could go to training camp and be like, "Oh, these practices are different than the ones because I saw with the other ones," and and
everything
you
is
do all that.
Yeah.
But then it's once you get out there, game one, moving forward, what do you do? So like I think personally, it is important to start hot. I think it is important to get off on the right foot.
Sorry, I wanted to ask Crimson because usually I don't know if I've ever tried to be dismissive of Crimson because he's always got good points, but he was saying, do you remember dismissing my concern about the coaching staff? I'm confused. Do you mean Eberflus's coaching staff back then or this new upcoming coaching staff, Crimson? Because if I dismissed your point, I don't recall, and I would feel bad because you
lay it back out there and we'll address it.
Yeah,
sure.
I think we were trying to win. They would have. I don't know if that means the Saints. I think they were trying to win. I think that's why you signed Derek Carr. But yeah, no, not sure what he means.
Yeah, but at the end of the day, though, it's nice that we do have a good amount of picks going into this draft as well, because, like I said, there's going to be some expiring contracts. There's going to be some secondary guys that you either have to let walk or sign at the end of this year, and you still have to kind of be concerned about that too. So you got to find replacements for those guys as well, and it's going to be a make it or break it year for a lot of players. And so, yeah, hopefully we go out there and start hot. I mean, I think that's important every year, but I would love to see them get it off on the right foot right away moving forward, and see some good football next year, because that's what you went out there and spent the money to do, to hire a head coach like that. Like, dude, I don't believe in that whole, I don't know, first year thing. Like after what I saw in Washington too, like, dude, you could do it.
Right.
You could do it.
Yeah.
Like you could go out there. And
If this coaching staff is that good as
Yeah.
we hope they are, it should be like 1 year maybe. Like I could say 8 games in, it's a little sloppy and they're gelling, but by week 10, you should see the nucleus of this coaching staff. You should see the whatever they're going to become start to become, right? So if they look kind of disjointed and sloppy by week 10, I have like long-term concerns probably. But I think by like week 10, you should be able to see what the fuck this team is going to be for the next like 5 years under Ben Johnson and this coaching staff.
I agree. I think the writing's going to be on the wall pretty early on.
Yeah.
And they're going to know. I still need to see it, though. And that's the hard part about all this. You know what I mean?
I'm going to be
And so, like,
patient, but
yeah. And I'm going to be excited because at the end of the day, like the only thing I can do is compare to what we had before. Okay, so in 2023, our running backs coach was fired by our HR under Matt Eberflus. Okay, so I'd rather have Eric Bieniemy instead. Yeah. Like in comparison, that's a much better upgrade. So sure, you know what I mean, like things like that. And
then sorry, one more thing from Saturday, if I can comment. I almost can't tell sometimes when Carl is trolling us, but if I can't tell if he actually wants Ashton Genty in the first round, because it's the craziest thing I've ever heard. But depending on how free agency goes, if you sign a full offensive line in the offseason in free agency, somehow, some way, all right, maybe I'll entertain it. But the Ashton Genty
falls
thing,
to 10.
No, that means the teams will want to take him. So
David, you know why I'm excited? Yeah, exactly, because you're getting a bigger trade. Exactly the same thing I said.
I'll move down 2 spots and get a 3rd-round pick with Dallas. For Jerry Jones, Jerry might trade, I don't know, a first and next year's second for Ashton Genty with how crazy he is. Like, to move up 2 spots, I have no idea. There's no way. And I'm watching these, like I said, I'm at this point, I'm starting with what the Bears need. So I've gone through about like 4 or 5 hours of like offensive linemen. Dude, there is not one special dude in this draft period. And the guys that are projected to go early, I like less. And the guys who are projected to take later, I'm like, that's a good fucking pick at 22. Tyler Booker. And I want to talk about this with Carl with the NFL show tomorrow if we're doing a mock draft, but I will get into some specifics with the Bears here. So Tyler Booker, I looked at his height, weight, and what he's good at and what he's bad at based on his thing. He's about 6'5", 350, 355. He is a big fucking boy. Now, I went and looked at Detroit's guards and the percentage of snaps that Detroit played with traps and pulling guards. And they were one of the highest percentage pulling guard teams in the NFL. The one thing when I watch Tyler Booker is that dude can, if he has a goal, he's a weapon. He's a tool. If he knows he's coming off the line, running and hitting like a defensive tackle, he's a really, really good. Please hop on, Carl.
You were saying?
No, it's not. It's not that we don't want a big body, Carl. It's that Tyler Booker is not. He's almost like a 1990s guard. He's like, go hit your guy. Even in pass protection, when he was kind of when it goes into pass protection, and he's
you hear
not
that
sure.
Because you begged Carl, because you begged him.
Yeah.
Oh, come on. Okay.
No, I think it's a good conversation for Carl because we're going to get into some college stuff. But I'm being specific about the projected Daniel Jeremiah pick at 10. I think. Do you need to send him an invite if he wants to come on?
I did.
Okay. Tyler Booker is like slow as molasses on pulling and traps. He, like, when you see a good quick guard, you watch like Philly and like the center of the guard pull, and they're almost to the second level past the right tackle or maybe even the tight end. By the time the running back has some patience and does some like hop steps to get in there, dude, Tyler Booker is barely to the right tackle because he was playing left guard. He's barely at the right tackle. Those traps are going to have to be fucking quick. He was slow as fucking shit on those traps and those pulls. And Ben Johnson ran that shit all day long in Detroit. If he plans on running those traps and stuff, like, I'm telling you, Tyler Booker's not his dude. He'd have to like lose 20 pounds and get quicker and play off his game. He also strikes me as indecisive and not very flexible in a panicky moment. every time he pancake blocked somebody, it was a corner or an undersized linebacker. Whenever he was matched up, I was watching him play like Mississippi Valley something, MSTSU or some shit. And anytime he was matched up on an end or like a defensive tackle, and he wasn't sure what type of moves the guy was going to do, he was backpedaling like a son of a bitch. These are like guys that aren't even going to get drafted. They're not even going to be competing. They're probably going to sell insurance next year at like MDSU or some shit. And you could see Tyler Booker. He'd pop up. He'd be like expecting a spin move or like a swim move. And the moment like this guy bull rushed him, he's on his heels because he couldn't figure out the body language or what to do in that moment. When left to his own devices, I don't like Tyler Booker at all. I don't like what he's doing.
What's wrong with MDSU, man?
I mean, they're fine. They're going to all be plumbers next year, but like it's all good. But dude, it was rough. Like Tyler Booker tape is not, it's super traditional. It'd be like a fuck, dude, safe pick is like such an understatement. He's not mean. He's not mean to his peers. He's mean as fuck to the quarterbacks. He'll throw them and fall down on top of them. He'll take a little undersized middle linebacker and throw him around and jump on top of them. But like in the NFL, when everybody's as big, as strong as you, I don't know if that shit's going to translate. I don't know.
I'm so proud of myself because I don't watch film, and you corroborated my thought of there not being a Joe Alt, anyone generational good enough in this draft at offensive line, right?
Dude, they're like, all Braxton.
We need to piecemeal it together on the inside via, late first, second, third, whatever the case is, right?
I've heard the same
regarding
the top tackles that like if they don't work out that tackle, they might wind up being good guards.
Yeah, and that's why I like
generational left tackle. Period. Like
I'm gonna give J2K his flowers, and I don't know if J2K got this from Dane Brugler because I always like to default to Dane Brugler because I think that he's just the best. I like how he presents it more than his accuracy, whatever the case is. Right? He actually mocked the Ohio State tackle to the Bears at 10. Just because that's the type of tackle that we're talking about, projecting someone to be good due to an injury. There's just no one surefire enough to take it 10. Hell, if you trade down and take a tackle like what me and Paul did on Saturday, I'm okay with it, but I didn't really feel good about it. The way that I validated that was saying that he was like a top 3 prospect, and it was kind of like hope core almost. The last thing before he gets lost in translation too, regarding Tyler Booker, all you have to do is watch 2 games. Rose Bowl, where they got their ass kicked by the eventual national champion Michigan Wolverines, and then this past year, I don't know if he played in the whatever shit MDSU Bowl that they played in. They lost to Michigan again, and if he's going up against like Kenneth Grant, Mason Graham, that should tell you the whole story that you absolutely need to see about Tyler Booker if he's worth it or not.
He got dog walked against Michigan, and these are other rookies that are going to be drafted top 10, top 15. So they're not even like all pros who are.
And I don't want to hold it against him with Mason Graham, right? Because I'm getting to the point where like Mason Graham, Aaron Donald, apples to apples,
Carl,
like it's getting close.
I got Mason Graham number 2.
Yeah, I said this like 3 weeks ago. Okay, we could post a short so the Bearski film gets the clicks. I had Mason Graham going first overall.
He's not. Abdul Carter's
he
a
could.
better prospect.
What if the Titans? What if the Titans get fucked up and they're like, you know what, we got to trade this pick. There's not a good quarterback. Okay, Cam Ward is a second round pick. Shadur Sanders, go back to college with your dad, whatever the case is. Okay, we have to trade this pick, and everyone's like, no, fuck you. They're gonna take Mason Graham.
Who's the last defensive end that was taken at number 1?
Might have been Myles Garrett, ironically. I'm not sure.
I believe Myles Garrett is the right answer.
Again, Mason Graham would be a fantastic player, and made the comment in the chat here, Myles Garrett wants to be traded because of Abdul Carter. He will not go past 2, so I'm certain that the first 2 picks could be defensive players.
I don't even think Travis Hunter's that good. He's probably 3 or 4 in this draft. I mean,
you're going to want Travis Hunter to be a full-time wide receiver. Dude, you're not going to get your value there.
Here's the thing. Last year, my favorite cornerback in the draft was Christian Gonzalez. And I think that Christian Gonzalez, he's objectively good as fuck, Carl.
Well, Will Johnson wasn't in the draft, so.
Whatever, I'm saying last year. I think Christian Gonzalez is a better corner than Travis Hunter. And then I don't think that Travis Hunter is a top 5 receiver even in last year's draft. So, like, what is he? He's neither.
His value is both. but you can't play both ways in the NFL and not expect to get hurt.
Stupid. I don't understand.
And if you're going to take him at 3rd overall, you want to roll the dice on injury with your 3rd overall pick.
I can't wait to do this with you tomorrow. Let's stick to Bears here.
Yeah.
Dude, like Travis Booker is that's
Tyler.
why I said it's Tyler Booker. Thank you. Tyler Booker is so fucking boring and cookie cutter at that draft spot at 10. I don't know if like anybody has ever reached on a player like other than the Packers reaching on that tackle last year that I can't even remember his name because he never played a goddamn snap last year.
The guy who got blown up by Booker?
Yeah, like the 22nd overall pick from like Arizona State or whatever he was.
But, yeah.
Dude, Tyler Booker is nothing to write home about. You can draft him and plug him in at left guard and like probably set your watch to it that he's going to be fine. There are going to be games where he gets beaten like a fucking drum. I can almost guarantee you that in the NFL level. Like that dude is so indecisive. I'm telling you, I saw moves where guys they just had to kind of stutter step. And this dude's already on his heels because he was waiting for a hand to touch him. And as soon as they got his hands on him, he's using only strength. There's no technique there. His leverage sucked. He was never the low man. He's already 6'5". And this is what I was talking about with the guards in Detroit. Forget their names off the top of my head, but I did the research. One is 6'6", 300.
Zeitler's a free agent.
6'6", 305. The other guy was even closer to Tyler Booker, 6'5", 322. This dude is 30 pounds heavier than the closest comparative guard in Detroit. That line was because they were quick. They knew their positions. They were decisive. They knew where to go. They were lots of trap. If you were listening while we were talking, it was one of the highest rates of traps, pulls, counters, anything where the guards have to be out of position and not traditional, just bang your head into a wall. If you want to run the I formation in fucking 2025 with Tyler Booker, you'll probably do okay. But anything else
maybe they don't need a guard to pull and be athletic if they've got Roschon Johnson being the lead blocker at fullback, right? So maybe they don't need that.
Again,
I say that jokingly, half jokingly.
But if Ben Johnson is like a guy who really is good at being, like he said, throwing the playbook and building it from scratch and knowing what he can do, to Paulie's point, I'd rather get goddamn Tevin Jenkins back for $14 million if that's what you need him for. I'd rather genuinely do that and then trade back down a little bit.
And target defense if you need to. We still need defensive line too. You totally get a defensive tackle, defensive end.
Well, if we're
talking
about this as a Bears draft, do you want me to pull up the mock that me and Paulie did?
Because you know what's funny? I don't know. You guys had Kelvin Banks going super early, but Kelvin Banks is right now projected to be the 2nd or even 3rd tackle taken, which is insane.
And that's exactly what he went in our draft.
He's somehow dropping really, really bad. Kelvin Banks is projected to be a left tackle / guard. At that point, dude, I'd rather have Kelvin Banks because, I didn't even know you guys got him. I forgot that you guys got him in that.
Yeah,
absolutely.
So here's the funny
Banks
thing.
Is a great guy at 17 because he can pop inside at left guard and be an athletic left guard. In a pinch, he could be left tackle if Kieran ends up being an absolute fucking bust. And you can start him at left guard this year and pop him out to left tackle next year if you can't get a deal done with Braxton Jones. I would rather have this draft.
So look at just full context, David. I'm sure you watched the whole episode, but for anyone who didn't watch the Lions My podcast with me and Paulie on Saturday, this draft was under the basis of there were 3 core moves that the Bears were going to make on their offensive line. A, and most unrealistic, would be to make Trey Smith the highest paid offensive lineman in NFL history. Probably isn't going to happen. We won't get that lucky. B, someone like Drew Dahlman. I think I heard Dave mention something about the center from the Colts. I think it's Ryan Kelly. One of those types of moves where it's kind of like your fallback option. And then if the shit hits the fan, just overpay Tevin Jenkins, right? So in combination to that, we've obtained either a starting left tackle or a guard, as David just alluded to, another guard, a starting running back, in my opinion, a starting, he would rotate with Billings, in my opinion, but that caliber of defensive lineman and Kenneth Grant. And then Landon Jackson, who is probably not going to start, but it's like a rotational edge piece. But if you looked at Landon Jackson's measurables, he's massive, and that's exactly what Dennis Allen wants out of a defensive end. So, I don't know, man. It makes sense, in my opinion, with what we got. I know Dane Brugler mocked Wyatt Millum and Landon Jackson to the Bears as well. So, this feels like it would be a home run draft, in my opinion.
Oh, absolutely. I forgot who you guys ended up drafting, but I love this draft. If this ended up somehow, like you said, Kenneth Grant is not getting that far. He's not getting to.
I know
41
it's ridiculous. He won't make it past the Chiefs, whether it's
20s
31
probably?
or 32, right?
20s even.
But like I've said this a lot of times again, just last time for the people who haven't heard it before. O'Marion Hampton would be drafted with the Carolina pick that we acquired in the 101 trade, right? So for one measly first overall pick, we acquired a starting wide receiver, a starting quarterback, and a starting running back. That would just be so perfect in my mind. I don't care if it's that early. I've got news for everyone, breaking news. O'Marion Hampton will not make it out of the first round. So this is the last time I'm probably going to beat this drum because he's just that good.
Yeah, and I believe that's where I got baited into saying something like, yeah, unless he races somebody and they hit a tree.
Oh, and I did so
That's
much
how we
editing on
did
that
it,
video,
there
like
we
I
go.
told you, Paulie, and it fucking had like a chunk of audio that was missing. It was bad, but it's still on the channel, so. It was so
Yeah.
good.
Very entertaining,
Definitely.
but no.
Oh, Paulie had an all-timer.
I heard
I
it.
was deep in the tank about pick 72, and I saw Kyron Lacey there. I said, well, Paulie, how would you feel about drafting a murderer at wide receiver? And just zero hesitation. He said, if he's productive, I lost it, man. I'm going to use that so often moving forward. That was an all-timer, Paulie. Bravo to you.
I mean, Jalen Carter is in a Super Bowl, guys. So
And he's probably going to kill it. He's going to kill it, right? That's
Oh, yeah.
That's the game analysis. He killed it.
Let's be real here. Like, Myles Garrett did hit a dude in the head with a helmet.
Yeah, my friend calls him the convict. Why not? But like,
attempted murder.
So
You do that in the streets. That's attempted murder, guys.
so you don't want Myles Garrett?
no.
Not Carl.
That's Myles Garrett would be a terrible acquisition just for the fact that
Yeah,
it takes so many
100%.
resources, right?
Exactly.
He would clearly become your best player on your defense, all that good stuff. He would elevate the team tremendously, but that's about it. You wouldn't be able to afford Trey Smith, in my opinion, because the cap hit. You wouldn't have any draft resources to invest in the rest of the offensive and defensive lines. Like, I don't think it'd be a good move whatsoever.
So then
I'll
counter
be
argument.
actively pissed if we get Myles Garrett.
So then
Yeah, we are not a Khalil Mack away. This is not a 2018 situation whatsoever.
I'd
Ryan
rather
Poles
get
doesn't
current
gamble
Khalil
on
Mack.
this too.
But
that's what I'm saying,
like
but look at
for
what
a
Khalil
lot
Mack
less
did
money,
for-
all that stuff. Yeah, for free. Yeah.
Look at the impact that Khalil Mack did have, though. Like 2018 is not 2018 if we don't. Get
Yeah, but that team, you're not that team yet.
We're
You're
not a
one
tw-
Khalil
we're not a
Mack
2018
away from
yeah.
that.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Exactly.
Myles
No, I know.
Garrett
I'm
does not-
against it, too.
Puts
I'm
you at
against it.
9
I'm
wins.
not.
Myles Garrett does that for you. That's it.
Unless
but
something hits
for
the
the-
fan and all it takes is like a player and a couple seconds, like that's a little bit different. But
Carl, I want to even go further in the mock draft tomorrow than we thought at 10 because I feel like 17 to 20 is where the Bears trade back. Like you guys fucking stole my thunder with your own mock draft, really, because it's perfect. Because Ashton Genty, you want to talk about a team? I think it's beautiful because I'm also watching 2 tight ends get taken 12, the top 12. It's Colston Loveland and the other fucking kid.
Colson Loveland will not make it past his beloved coach's
I know.
Chargers
15.
at 20.
20 maybe. Who's the first guy who's being compared to like Jeremy Shockey?
The Penn State tight end, I'm
Penn
not a
State
fan of him. He kind of reminds me
Whatever.
of the just a utility like fullback. I don't know. He's
But
weird.
here's part of what I'm saying though is like Brock Bowers is going to increase their like they need to send a Rolex to Brock Bowers, those 2 guys.
Well, I don't know if the Penn State guy is like a hyper receiving threat. I'm sure he is.
He is.
But
He's
I
an
don't-
inline tight end. He's a traditional like he's Brock Bowers.
Colson
this year.
Loveland is very comparable to Brock Bowers, I think, is what you're trying to say.
Sure. Either way, these 2 guys owe Brock Bowers a big tip because of what he did for their draft stock and what teams watch Brock Bowers do. Because people forget, people are stupid as fuck. These teams are dumb as fuck, and they're all victims or what is it, hostages to the moment, right? So they're gonna watch Brock Bowers do what he did in 1 year and be like, well, we're better than that, and we know. Let's get one of our own Brock Bowers. So
Well,
let's
Brock
draft 2
Bowers
tight
did
ends in
have
top
the
20.
generational talent or tag, and neither of those 2
And he
tight
went
ends do.
11 or 7 or whatever he went. Like,
Yeah, it's just weird.
if
Okay,
you
so,
do a
like-
redraft right now, Brock Bowers goes 2. But what my point is,
and
is
Gronk
is,
went in the second round, man.
exactly.
Sometimes,
but my
sometimes
point
these
is,
guys drop.
I thought Gronk
But
had a
that's-
problem as well, though.
Good, that's what-
I don't think he
That's
killed someone like Aaron Hernandez, but
intelligence. I think he interviewed terribly. He was like a bro. Who
I
would,
love-
like,
I love-
spike beers in his interviews.
I love Gronk just referring to himself in third person. Like, Gronk wants to play football, but football
My
hurts.
my favorite
Gronk wants
Gronk
to do weed.
my favorite
Gronk can't do
Gronk
weed
bit
and
was
thing.
him saying that he sold, like he got rid of all of his money, used all of his money up to get a hot tub, and then just at that point, every bit of money he got was like 30 rack, 30 rack, 30 rack. Like he's just a total bro. Tom Brady saved his ass.
No, but my point is like why I think that the mock draft is important this year is because I'm watching like Josh Simmons at 10. What you said, Dane Brugler doing is unrealistic and not likely. Josh Simmons is probably going to go mid-20s to late 30s.
Victim of the moment, right? Like Paul's got this down. What goes in the top 10? Tackle, offensive tackle, defensive tackle, edge, quarterback. Like
But you don't think like
I'm willing to wager that there are 2 tackles taken before the Chicago Bears draft at pick 10.
And then realistically, guys, there's
Yeah.
the desperation for a quarterback plays in so hard every year.
Oh,
before
I
the
mean,
draft. That
Cam
inflates
Ward-
everything so much. Like even when the prospects aren't there,
That's why I'm
there's
trying
gonna
to
be
say, like
somebody.
the way the Titans handle it is going to dictate a lot. Because if the Titans feel like they want to trade out, I think that immediately signals that like, okay, this class sucks. First quarterback might not get taken until 10th, 7th, whatever the case is. Like that can really set the tone. But if it just becomes like a, you know what, fuck it, take Cam Ward at 1, then we could have a real situation that would really help the Chicago Bears. And
Absolutely.
I saw J2K off his crack pipe saying that teams are going to struggle selecting Mason Graham because of short arms, which, by the way, his arm length is totally fucking fine. And if you watch tape, Mason Graham, again, apples to apples with Aaron Donald. But if 3 quarterbacks go ahead of the Bears and Mason Graham falls to 10 and the Bears draft Mason Graham, you guys might not see me for a couple weeks because I'll be living in a fucking coma.
I thought you said you don't watch tape.
Uh...
I'm kidding.
Part of my
I watch the football games,
I know.
but for someone speaking on that, we got to see some tape.
My
Anyway.
point that I was trying to say is like slave of the moment is Carl, we got to have like when Carl goes full contrarian and goes into like his little like skit, we got to just call it like crack pipe Carl, right? And just like when crack pipe Carl goes off and he just starts talking about Ashton Genty and maybe even trading
I'll
up
just get an
for Ashton
overlay.
Genty.
I'll get an overlay to pop up with the little.
Yeah, we just
pipe.
need like a little crack pipe.
I don't know if you guys see my name. Like Clay Harbor is a fucking doofus, so that's why I've got my Twitter or my name on here is that. But I could just stop the camera and have Clay Harbor's face light up. I can make that happen right now.
No, we need crack pipe Carl to you and like you just superimpose over Tyrone Bigham's face.
Yeah, that would be sick. I mean,
yeah.
I can't fully pull that off because I'm sure we'd get canceled at that point. But
Yeah. No, but like when I'm listening to Crack Pipe Carl talk about Ashton Genty in the 10, like Crack Pipe Jerry Jones is a real thing. He's a slave of the moment too. He's watching fucking Saquon Barkley and he's watching fucking Derrick Henry and he's watching Jahmyr Gibbs take their teams to the fucking playoffs. And there's some dumbass GM who's like, we're an Ashton Genty away. Right? Like I fully agree with Crack Pipe Carl that like Ashton Genty on the Chargers is like a 2,000 all-purpose yards type of player. But like the other part of like the running back thing is like, what is your guy, Omarion Hardy? You don't think he's an 1,800 yard all-purpose? Omarion Hampton, sorry, thank you. Omarion Hampton is like an 1,800 all-purpose yard guy on the Chargers. Like, absolutely, the fuck he is.
Yes, and that's what I'm saying. Like
1750,
even with,
they're all negligible. The differences are so fucking negligible.
We'd say with Saquon Barkley, we said if he's on the Bears, he is not having the season he had. Period.
No,
you know what I mean. So like he's still a good player and everything like that, but like
I think the way that this draft is shaped out and what is there for the taking, it does perfectly work out for the Bears. There are 4 offensive linemen that I'd be fine with taking at like 15. And like Tyler Booker's one of them, but you shouldn't take him at 10. Like Kelvin Banks at 17 is great.
Not too long ago, Tyler Booker was the 41st overall prospect on these, mediums that I'm utilizing, right? So or on Saturday when we did the mock, I saw him at 17, 18. I almost shit myself. I said, what the fuck? Like, it just doesn't make sense.
It's
just
one
not
of
that
the
good.
benefits of sucking so bad and having so many holes to fill.
Dude, no,
there's so many options that don't make sense.
I don't
Take a
even
picture.
mean it that way. I don't mean it that way because, like, dude, Josh Connerly,
the tackle out of Oregon.
I think is the best pure left tackle in this draft.
Wouldn't put it past him.
Pure left tackle, best feet, quickest quickest fucking feet out of anybody. Will Campbell has great hands. Like that dude's like, just to get stereotypical about it, like he is a white left tackle. That is
Well,
exactly what Will Campbell
he's
is.
the
He
one
is
who
a
has the
fucking-
short arm issue. He is probably going to be a guard. Like there was talk about Peter Skoronsky playing tackle. I think he did play tackle at Northwestern, but immediately was pigeonholed into guard because of his measurables, and he's been okay. Definitely has not been good. J.C. Latham hasn't helped him out. Go Alabama, you guys suck. But
that's kind of my point is like, there are 5 tackles I'd be comfortable taking at like 15. I get it. The run on tackles will be there because there always is one. But here's the thing. Every draft has a run on something. And it doesn't necessarily have to be tackle, like you say, because slave of the moment, that's not a slave of the moment thing you said, crack pipe, Carl. Like tackles in the top 10 are not a slave of the moment thing. That's a just common sense draft philosophy that's like built into the NFL for the last 15 to 20 years. A run on some shit is going to be when Cam Ward and Shadur Sanders go back to back like 3 and 4 to like, because I'm sorry, Cam Ward, if depending on what they do with Myles Garrett, because Myles Garrett is worth like a top 10 pick. They need to move him by the draft so they know what direction their football team is going in. But if Myles Garrett stays on the team next year, and this is like the worst news for the Bears, Cam Ward was not getting past Cleveland. It like you can't fuck like if you're at ownership there, you can't fuck Kevin Stefanski again that bad. You need to get him a goddamn quarterback. And it's not Deshaun Watson because he decided to tear his ankle again and sit this whole next year out again and rehab again. And you're not going to get him Jameis Winston and a bunch of Band-Aids again. You're going to get him somebody for real. You're going to get him. Hello.
That's why
I said there. He's not getting. You're saying like he's not getting past 2. Like, dude, that's Cam Ward. Like, and then the rate, like the Giants. What the fuck are the Giants supposed to do? They're taking Shadur.
They've been talking about Jackson Dart for months. They want him in the top of the second. I don't know, man. I feel like Kevin Stefanski's the guy who maybe like was fringe a trade candidate and wanted out of that nightmare scenario, but the Browns told him no. So I think that what you're going to see, ideally, if you're the Browns, and I know this is delving into like the NFL ski side of things, I do think that Myles Garrett gets moved. I do think he goes to the NFC somewhere. My gut tells me Detroit because that terrible franchise needs a fucking spark after the brain drain, right? So they will, I think, run it back with Watson, knowing that he's terrible and costs money and the contract's awful. So they'll stockpile picks. They'll get Abdul Carter at 2, and then next year is the year where they'll have several first-round picks to toy around, right? If they want any sort of type of quarterback in 2026, they will have the ammunition to acquire it thanks to Myles Garrett. So I think that that's where that's headed.
Yeah, I mean, we're really, Paul, you want to hop on NFL ski tomorrow? Like, because it's going to be, this is what it's going to be. This is going to be just like,
well, I want to clarify what we're doing tomorrow because I still have that little segment that I think would be a lot of fun, but it can always live on the back burner. That's fine by me. But what does the chat want tomorrow? Are we doing a mock draft for the first round for all 32 teams? Are we doing a 4-round mock for the Bears? Like, what did you want to do?
Yes.
Both?
Yes.
We can do. We can do.
I still don't know what your surprise was, so depending on how long the surprise takes.
No. Like I can leave that on the back burner, man. If we got stuff to talk about, it's something that it won't go too far astray from when I concocted it. So it's totally fine if we don't touch on it tomorrow or next week or whatever. Doesn't matter.
Yeah, no. I think this. I haven't like it's so crazy because I don't consider myself an NFL draft guy by any means. But like by the time the draft is right at the cusp, like me and Paulie can talk about the first 2 rounds and where guys are going to go. Even Paulie gets into it, where it's like we know what the first 2 rounds of the layout are. This year, I'm just early to it. I'm not a fucking expert. I'm not a pro, but like anecdotal data and like what me and Paulie talk about is like we're very rarely wrong, just like hardcore about a prospect being like this guy fucking sucks. Like I was saying since like December that Marvin Harrison Jr. was the 3rd best receiver in that draft class last year. I'm going to stick to my guns about this shit. Like it's not these guys are better than me. Brugler and fucking, Daniel Jeremiah, like they definitely know, but I'm gonna like stick to my guns. I'm not gonna back off the fact that I think that Josh Connerly is the best left tackle in this fucking draft. Like I just see what I see. Good feet, good hands.
You guys should make that be known. Yeah,
we can even do a quick little mock draft tonight if you guys want. Just Chicago Bears only first.
Oh fuck yeah!
Yeah, I mean this is the Bears draft. I can help you guys out unless you want something else. But what is it pro? It's not pro football. It's Pro Football Network. There it is.
Because like I'm interested because I'm not, like I said with Carl. I'm not going to pretend like I've done my research yet because I haven't.
2 rounds.
Sure.
You want more?
Three.
Three rounds. 3 rounds is good because the Bears actually don't have a 4th round pick, and the video that I uploaded was a 4-round mock draft. Like we still only have 3 picks, but
Prometheus is cool as fuck. He's trimming a brisket to smoke overnight. What the fuck? That's so
bro, you've been listening to too much Cliff Victoria, Prometheus.
Yeah, because like if I have any effect on anything, it's just pure draft strategy, reasoning alone. You know what I mean? So that's why I even said like drop back out of 10. That's what makes the most sense.
Well, that's the dynamic that I think makes this work.
Know, but like.
The dynamic here makes
the most sense.
Yeah, Paulie, you can play the role of George McCaskey. Just sign the check and talk to us about philosophy.
Yeah.
But I like this a lot. So let me see if I can get this presented. Again, do we want to like? Is this just Chicago Bears? We don't care about trading anything like that, right?
I'll be right back in 1 second.
Okay.
I think take control of everybody because I think it fucking matters that we can argue about. Man, we're just doing NFL ski right now. All right, do Bears only. We'll do the full draft tomorrow.
I think if we do each pick and talk about it, I think that we should stick to 2 rounds.
Yeah. All right.
So
what do we got
know
there?
If you guys can see this well or not.
That's fucking crazy.
Yeah, Shedeur Sanders at 1, Cameron Ward at 2. This is really similar to what we just did on the Saturday show.
I think the
Campbell
Patriots
at
would
3.
shit their pants. So, for the record, there's no way Mason Graham gets past Mike Vrabel. People are fucking stupid.
I really pray to God you're wrong, but you're right. Abdul Carter, obviously. Travis Hunter here at...
Hunter feels like the perfect Jaguar. He's going to be useless.
Rashad Gann, yeah. Mason Graham at 6. That ripped me limb from limb. Oh boy, yeah. This is the more realistic draft where we've got Ashton Genty sitting at 10.
Tetairoa McMillan is absolutely going to Carolina. I think that dude is not that good, but he reminds me of the hype that Mike Evans got when he was coming out. I don't think he's nearly as good, but he's not like a straight line 6'5" catcher.
Yeah, the thing that scares me with Mr. McDonald here, he plays like a fraud. He does not play like a 6'5" imposing like young god. He plays like a pipsqueak.
Oh, is he available? He is. Ashton Genty.
Here's the thing.
Do we
have trade offers?
Do we want to do a trade offer? Yeah.
Yeah.
I can take a look at
see what the trade offers are.
All right, so we can go from 10 to 18 and pick up 50.
That's also
we can go from 10 to 14 and pick up 80. That's oh no, you get.
I'm not going to take either of those because neither of those teams would actually do this.
Hold on a second. Why wouldn't Seattle trade up?
Yeah, I would do that
if there's a tackle or something.
What do you mean? There's. Oh, I thought we were saying for like
Detroit. For like philosophy standpoint, I don't want to trade with Detroit, but you'd get 28-60, a second and a third. I don't even think that's a good trade.
If Seattle's trading with you, they're trading you for an offensive lineman. So you, by philosophy, won't do that. So I would go with the Colts.
See, like he's at 18. It just makes no sense.
The Colts are taking a corner.
A crack pipe Jim Irsay might say different.
The Colts are taking a corner, though, if they trade up. Who's your boy from Michigan?
William Johnson, is he? Oh, he's all the way down at 11. Dude, our mock draft, like, it starts to make more and more sense because they had the Bengals trading up.
That makes sense.
The Bengals trading up for Will Johnson to fucking shut down these idiots on the Chiefs and get Joe Burrow back in the Super Bowl. Like, it makes so much sense.
Take that Colts offer because they're going to trade up for Will Johnson. How much you want to bet if we trade with them, they're going to take Will Johnson right here?
Colts. From a philosophy, it makes perfect sense. Okay. Colts.
Because you're not scared of the Colts taking a lineman from you. They're not going to take a defensive tackle.
And I said this.
Yeah, right.
Okay. What is does
That's
that
so stupid.
does that mean that the Colts view Jonathan Taylor as Joy Taylor? Like, what's going on there? That's ridiculous.
Yeah,
Oh
so
my
stupid.
god.
We have 3 running backs in our backfield at all times now: Anthony Richardson, Joy Taylor, and Ashton Jenkins.
Joy Taylor. Oh my god. All right, well, now we're gonna get stupid.
Yeah, you got. If he's there, you take Will Johnson. Wait, who's that? No, not Will Johnson. We're not taking Will Johnson. Get the fuck out.
All right, well, hold on. Let's hear what Paulie has to say. Let's hear what George has to say. Offensive lineman. You've got Cameron Williams, who he was a right tackle. Paul, here's what happened. Cameron Williams played against Jack Sawyer, and Jack Sawyer, who's a defensive end for Ohio State, was a mid-second round pick. Because of Cameron Williams, Jack Sawyer is a guaranteed first-round pick this year. That's how bad this player is.
Beat him.
So I don't want to take him. Now, what if
Who's
we
available on
traded
defense?
down? What if we
Who's
traded
available on
down and
defense?
took
Who's
a
available on
tackle?
defense? You only have offense.
Yeah, I'm just looking at
Defense.
the offensive tackle and the guards. You want to see
What about
defense?
what about the defense? Yeah,
Cornerbacks?
the edge, the tackles.
You have your best. You have the
Yeah.
best cornerback
Mike
in the draft
Green-
available.
Mike Green is the biggest smokescreen because he was the player who had the clip at the Senior Bowl of him running some idiot over. Probably was a second-round pick, flew up to a first-round pick. He feels like he would be the perfect draft pick for the Lions if the Lions can't get a trade for Myles Garrett. But all these
So
other
here,
edges,
let me
Prince
explain this.
Princely is a second round. Like, there's nothing good here, Paul.
Go back to defensive tackles. Yeah,
This
Derek
guy I
Carr.
don't know much about.
No, he's not good. Basically, Paul, right now is your
Michigan
choice is your choice of the best cornerback in the draft available, who probably should have gone top 10, or the best guard in the draft available, who is exactly right at this spot.
So what this also this is bad if we take Will Johnson though, because that means I'm sorry, dude, Tyreek Stevenson's not going to safety. That would mean that Tyreek Stevenson went to that Judge Judy camp that the great Al Harris asked him to go to, and he just flamed the fuck out. Like
Is
again,
the tackle from Oregon still there?
Yeah, he is.
Yeah, he's gonna go be there at like 20 something.
Let's take a look at the tackles that have gone
But
up.
this
to
is where you might have to reach.
There's no
So this
tackle.
is a
There's no tackle though. Will Campbell is probably not a tackle. Maybe the Giants at 3 to decide that he is, but there's no other
Well, we
tackles that
fucked
have
up right
gone.
there.
Oh,
with
Calvin Banks.
going. Yeah,
Yeah. So I mean, if
I'd
you
like
could,
to take Calvin Banks.
if you have to even reach, but you're saying that that's gonna for sure fill a need. A whole lot of
Tyler
stuff
Booker
in mind.
is starting every game for 5 years.
I'm not taking a guard at 14,
Yeah, it's
And
and he
rough
doesn't.
sell,
It doesn't sound like he fits the scheme either.
I don't think so. Depends on what his scheme is going to be, but holy shit, he's not. I mean, he's going to be just a plug and play bruiser, and you could
At
play him
this
at right
point-
guard. I mean,
At this
I don't know.
point, we
I
should
assume
have
we're
just
getting
went
Trey
to
Smith.
18 and
Yeah.
drafted
Exactly.
Matthew Golden.
Exactly. Correct.
What? Matthew
If you,
Golden.
if you want to go back that far and you want like a piece that fits for your team, he's got speed for days.
Yeah, I wish we could go back and redo it. Yeah.
But this is where if you do, that's what I'm saying. We should
Can't do that in
redo
real
it.
life, George. That's not how
Correct.
this works, George.
No. Like,
Sorry.
So here's
You pull the trigger,
philosophically,
not me.
Pauly, like, would you have
No,
traded
I
back
speed
for
the car.
guaranteed left? I would like my opinion.
this is
the
where I
best
said, this is where
value
you
here
reach
is
them.
left tackle, left guard.
Yeah, this is where you
Would
reach
have
them.
been
Then go
Calvin
ahead and
Banks.
get the guy
Get
that
Tyler
you think
Booker,
is going to be, or like you said, or the tackle from Oregon that you feel like you could plug in a guard right away.
I don't know if you could plug him in at guard. I think he's got the best feet. I think he's the best pure left tackle in the class.
I mean, but yeah, I mean,
It's really hard for me to pass up Will Johnson. It's just no one's going to like that. And it doesn't make sense to acquire Will Johnson after trading down. Like, I don't know. I almost just don't want to touch that. So what are we saying, boys? We want the tackle?
Yeah, that's where I would lean.
Josh Connerly at 47. That's absolutely nuts.
We can make J2K really happy and take the potential best tackle in the draft out of speculation and have 3 left tackles that are all fighting injuries. That would
Or
be cool.
you do reach and get guard there. I mean, I know you don't want to take.
You got to go with the guard at that point. You got to cookie cutter.
not-
Hope he
it's not a
loses
great
weight.
Sexy pick,
And you
but I mean,
hope
if that's
that
the most
Dan,
for sure
what is
thing.
it, Dan
And he
Roushar
traded
is a
back.
good offensive
And you
line
traded
coach.
back. Yeah.
All right, so we're taking Tyler Booker.
I think so.
Yep.
352. What a fucking mammoth of a man. Smooth ass lettuce is on my ass. Go watch some Tyler Booker fucking footage. For 352,
Well, hey.
I guess.
Sure, we're going to take Tyler Booker, okay? All I'll say regarding that is if you get a decent enough center and you pair Tyler Booker with Trey Smith, even DeAndre Swift would be good enough to run up the middle at that point, it sounds like.
Yep. I agree.
So do we want to trade back yet again? I don't really like the infinite glitch shit.
No, I'm not a fan either.
No, yeah.
Colston Loveland's still available.
Next. This is ridiculous. Okay, here's another like breaking bit of news for you guys, okay? Guess who the Raiders just hired and stole from Ohio State to be their offensive coordinator?
Ryan Day.
Chip Kelly.
Yeah.
There's no shot.
They didn't.
If one of the two Ohio State running backs are available to the Raiders at 37, that is where they will go. Ideally for them, it'd be Trayvon Henderson. I'm hearing first round grade on him as well. Yeah. But even Quinshon Judkins, he will not make it past 37 on the Raiders. That is a fact. So Caleb Johnson here makes a lot of sense. Josh Connerly went at 35.
I'm taking Omari and Hampton.
Yeah, I mean, it's just a slam dunk again.
Yeah, this is where, just like I said yesterday, this is where you can go ahead and make that kind of gamble if you wanted to. Sure, I mean, second round
again.
Not worse.
Cameron Williams, Will Johnson still found a way to go to the Bengals. God is good. This Revel guy, I have no idea who that is. We're talking cornerbacks galore, right? Cornerback, safety. There's Josh Simmons, a tackle, feels like a good fit as well. Matthew Golden to the Vikings, great. They took an edge, another tackle. See, again, Mike Green to the Lions. There you go.
Yep,
defensive tackle. Kenneth Grant to the Bills. There you go. Emeka Ibuka. That feels weird, but sure. Does that mean that the little kid gets expendable? I can't think of his name. Devontae Smith.
I disagree. I don't think that feels weird. I think that feels perfect.
But like, they can't. I guess he'd be cheap, right? So run that contract into the ground, whatever. Tight end at 32. This is weird. Okay.
That makes sense, though, too. I think Colston Loveland goes before that, but I mean.
So again, looking at your running backs that are
Washington's
available
going line, or they're going tight end.
Can this be the Cameron Skadevu draft? Like, I'm all for. I literally have a sign that says draft Omari and Hampton, but
yeah, I mean,
I like it.
Look at defense.
Walter Nolan feels like the pick then if he's still here.
Yeah.
High upside with flashes, but struggles with consistency. Oh, great! So we're drafting another Gervon Dexter.
I was going to say he's also not the size for anybody in that he doesn't fit a role unless you're going to go full weird with it and just do like weird fronts. Throw somebody out at like Gervon Dexter out at defensive end just to fuck around.
I don't know if this doesn't sound too massive to me. Like,
no, that's what I'm saying. He's a 3-tech. Like, he's not a nose tackle. So that's why Gervon Dexter would slide out to defensive end on certain plays and then fucking have this guy play defensive tackle. Andrew Billings played nose guard or nose tackle, and then, Montez Sweat. I do like that as a NASCAR package or like a size package.
I gotta put pen to paper on this, but for the NFL Ski Show, I'd love to bring up a formation that I was thinking about when you guys were talking to Taylor Dell. I don't know. What are you guys leaning towards here?
Probably Omari and Hampton, because I think you're not drafting any. It depends. You know what? Honestly, it depends on, like, if I'm not mistaken, Jihad Campbell's a pass rusher, right? I haven't looked him up too much.
I see him right here from Alabama.
He's a full-on pass rusher.
He has the ability to contribute as a situational pass rusher.
So, like, depending on Dennis Allen's defense and if, like, Tremaine Edmonds gets cut, because I genuinely would not be shocked if he got just straight up fucking cut. I wouldn't hate, like, Jihad Campbell as, like, a fucking sweet, speedy linebacker to mix it up in there with TJ Edwards. Also, your TJ Edwards proofing the future if he doesn't re-sign.
I mean, we're just looking at the same names. Wyatt Millam at guard. We're going to have a pick again right at 41, so.
Yeah, take O'Marion and then.
Do we want to trade with the Colts yet again? Will they select the running back? We should do a social experiment. Go back 4 picks. See if the Colts take another running back.
Yeah,
This
here's
is where
you-
I would say, depending on how your draft went and you got Tyler Booker, I
This
want
is
like Jihad.
disrespectful.
Yeah. I honestly might even want Colson Loveland right there because you're not going to have Gerald Everett.
that wouldn't be a bad pick.
If the Bears end the second round and tell Mr. Carl Harbor here that the Bears passed on Will Johnson and Colson Loveland, I'm going to be so upset.
If he's there, I'd take Colson Loveland personally.
Do it.
I mean, how does Ben Johnson utilize Colson Loveland then? Because he's more of a wide receiver than anything. Like that was Colson Loveland's big knock and praise and why he's a first round grade this year is because after he helped Michigan win the national championship this year, he became a more well-rounded tight end. He had these great blocks and he dominated against Michigan State, all these cool things, right? So he's just a complimentary tight end. But
sure, but I mean,
as a
you're
wide
also
receiver,
one Cole Kmet injury away from what?
Right.
sure.
Right? So there's always that aspect. Like you don't really have a plan B there. If there's a guy that's dropped back and you can get some value at this pick, and you think
Also,
he's a
like,
good
are
player,
we are as
like,
much as
and-
we three like Cole Kmet, are any of us certain he's not the problem?
I would say that he's very comparable to Sam Laporta as far as skill set.
I do too.
I
but
think
I'm
that Ben
saying,
Johnson
like,
can
he
unlock
might be
him.
I agree, but if Colson Loveland's just sitting there, like,
If Cole Kmet made his name with Justin Fields throwing him the football, I think that Cole Kmet's the real fucking deal.
fair enough.
and I mean, and I've seen Cole Kmet become a much better blocker over the years as well. So like,
Jalen Milroe.
you can still
I made that comment.
use a backup tight end drafted in the second round that has a lot of upside. I mean, that's not the worst move. If not, I mean, I would lean towards guard, but
We don't need another guard. We took Tyler.
yeah,
Booker.
I mean, I think Loveland makes the most sense.
Yeah.
Okay, well, we're gonna do it. I'm not sure how I feel about it. The Michigan fan says that, but fine by me. Okay, so this is our last pick, right? Can I see my picks? No, we picked up 80 in that trade, so we got 72 and 80. Just a quick recap on what we just witnessed.
I'm just gonna get some water. I'll be right back.
Walter Nolan's gone. Kyle Kennard is gone. Wyatt Millum is gone. That's a lot higher than when we took him. Quinshon Judkins to the Bengals. I'll see it when I believe it.
Dude, really? I
Steelers
really
got
like
Jalen
these
Milroe.
fucking- Yeah, J.R. Campbell at 53. That's crazy.
Jack Sawyer. That's also false. He won't make it past 32 in my opinion. Princely, that
Really?
would have been a player I would have liked.
Jack Sawyer is so average, dude.
He's terrible, but I'm telling you, like just his performance in the national championship or the true national championship game against Texas, he just
Cool. He'll be another James Laurinaitis and flame out in 5 years.
I should also. I don't know if I saw this, and I hate to keep bringing up J2K's name, but I saw J2K compare Jack Sawyer to T.J. Watt, and that kind of frustrated me. That upset me.
I guess
Marcus
T.J. Watt wasn't
Ambar.
highly regarded out of college, so it's not a crazy comment.
Ooh, now this is another like terrible thing, but Isaiah Bond
I
is a
know.
great wide receiver for
Are there
Alabama.
any centers available?
This might have to be the spot where we take because all these centers are
So,
terrible.
If
And
I'm not mistaken, Jared Wilson is a bad center prospect purely out of injury history.
Gray Zabel is the one who everyone's hyped up about. I think that we should take him.
Can you real quick on Jared Wilson? I believe he's got an injury history, but he's pretty good.
He's from Georgia. These Georgia centers kind of scare me.
Yeah.
Has a strong base and impressive hand usage while also possessing the fluid mobility to work in space.
Here's the thing: centers at 4th round, they're not starters anyway. So I'm operating under the assumption we have a 2-year starter somewhere that this guy is going to take his job in 2 years and get coached up. So I'm down for any center you guys want to take here.
I'm not sure if you've gotten to the Gray Zabel side of things, Dave, but He's the player who at the Senior Bowl really stood out. Everyone got excited about. He played tackle. He has film at tackle, but he was a player who's very flexible, and he could play either guard position or center. So
he better be fucking flexible. A 6'5" center is insane.
Oh, I see what you did there. But yeah, I mean that's the speculation is that he could play center. Also, just while I'm thinking about it, do you think that the Bears would give a rat's ass about what hand the center uses to snap? Because Caleb has his entire first year of experience with a left-handed center.
What running backs are still there?
We already took a running
back, they wouldn't give a shit.
To...
You know why, Carl?
Because this is still literally there.
This is the first year that you would. This is the first year Caleb took snaps from under center anyway.
So that's what I mean. This is where you can make the case too that like instead of getting Hampton, you take a different position at there, and then you get a guy like Scatterboo.
I'm also in the camp that Mr. Cameron Scatterboo will not be available in the third round. I think like there's just something that's going to happen. I think
that's something you guys kept doing on Saturday. I'm like, you can't say that it's not available for one fucking round, and then so it's unrealistic, but then it's realistic for the next round.
I'm sure we were inconsistent there, so I apologize for that. But
yeah.
Cam
like,
Scatterboo,
I can't take this guy. It's not real.
I could see Cam Scatterboo like breaking the record for most, bench presses for a running back, and then he'll go in the second round. Something honestly, will happen with
I'm just saying, like early reflection when you're in that position, and Hampton's there and available, you still might be better off taking somebody else because there might be, you know what I mean? I don't know. It's just interesting to see how things kind of pan out.
Yeah.
I gotta go soon, so let's just wrap this up. I'd be at round 4 taking a center or a wide receiver.
Yeah, I'm good too. You can.
We are going to go with Zabel because he's the hot prospect, and then here at last pick 80,
wide receivers. You do need a receiver this year.
That's why I'm looking at the kid from Illinois. I don't know his name. Let me see if I can find it for you guys real quick. Pat Bryant. He was really good against Michigan. Pat Bryant can play football. If you can get him in the 5th, 6th, 7th round, he would be a great developmental guy. And what are we saying we want to kind of fill this out? You still got Travion Henderson at 80. This is ridiculous.
Yeah, take the safety. Who cares at this? I don't know. Doesn't matter. Yeah. I do have to go too. We'll
do more. We'll do more tomorrow. But thanks for everybody.
Kyron Lacey, it is
done. Let's get the official.
There you go.
There you go. The official look. All right, guys. Thanks so much for joining us tonight, for putting up with us for over 2 hours. We had a really good guest on earlier with Taylor, and then Carl. Thank you so much for hopping on and doing a nice little mock draft. So, yeah, bear down everybody and check out David and Carl tomorrow on the NFL Ski Show. It starts at 6 p.m. Right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Yep, 6 p.m. Central Time.
We'll be doing a 2-round mock draft for all 32 teams. It sounds like so.
There you go. All right. Bear down, everybody.
See you.